Personnel Administration Affairs Committee is being held on Wednesday, October 28th, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. via teleconference. As chairman of the Personnel Administrative Affairs Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. We are utilizing Zoom, and the meeting link can be found on the agenda as well on the city's website. You can also join by telephone by dialing 1-929-205-2099. Meeting ID number is 818-3046-7784, and passcode number is 904784. The public may also view this meeting on Comcast Channel 16. We previously gave notice to the public of the necessary information for accessing the meeting through public postings. Instructions have also been provided on the City of Nashua's website at www.nashua.nh.gov and publicly noticed at City Hall and the Nashua Public Library. If anyone has a problem accessing the meeting via phone or channel 16, please call 603-821-2049 and they will help you connect. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting via the methods mentioned above, the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance by our clerk, Alderwoman Kelly.
Thank you, Chairwoman Karen. Alderman at Large Ben Clemens.
I am here and I can hear everyone, and the only person home with me is my wife.
Alderman Lopez.
I'm here, I can hear everyone, and I'm alone.
The clerk, I am here, I'm alone, and I can hear everyone. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I'm a little bit stuffy, and I will try not to cough too much. Alderman Cleaver.
I'm here, I'm alone, and practicing social distancing.
All members are present.
Okay, thank you. Also in attendance, Madam Clerk?
Yeah, just one moment. I'm trying to get to the square up so I can see everybody. Do we need to note the infrastructure members as well?
No, just, well, I suppose you could. Yeah, that's fine.
All right, also in attendance is Alderman Laws. I see Jill Stansfield, Alderman Harry Gathright, Alderman Klee. We already called Alderman Cleaver. Director Cummings. Did I miss anybody?
Is the mayor there?
I do not see the mayor.
Okay. Okay. Do we have anyone that is wishing to give public comment?
There are a few names on the list that I do not recognize, but let's see if they're here for public comment.
Okay. Anyone raising their hands?
I don't see any. Call a second time.
Yep. Anyone here that is wishing to make public comment for those items that will be discussed today as part of this meeting.
All right, looks like we are all clear on that.
Okay. Do we have any communications?
We have a communication from Jill Stansfield, parking manager, regarding response to questions on overnight bans with fines.
Okay. So without objection, I accept the communication and will place it on file. We have 2 interviews. One is the Animal and Dog Park Advisory Board. Mayor, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Is this Kathy Abel?
Oh no, I thought you said my name.
Maya,
Okay.
thought you said Maya. That makes sense.
No, I'm sorry. No, Animal and Dog Park Advisory Board. That's Kathy Abel.
She is on.
She is?
Yes.
Okay. Is the mayor there?
I do not see the mayor.
Cheryl's not there?
Mm-mm.
Okay. All right. Then we'll, Kathy, since the mayor's
Yes.
not here, would you please introduce
Excuse-
yourself?
Excuse me, excuse me, the mayor is joining momentarily. I just want to let you know, Alderwoman Carey.
Oh,
Thank you, Director Cummings.
thank you for letting us know. Okay. We can't do too much until the mayor comes on. Why don't we do this? Kathy, why don't
Yes.
you give us a little bit of history into the reason why you want to be on this committee, and then when the mayor comes in, he can speak about why he is appointing you to the Animal Dog Park Advisory Board. How's that?
That sounds fine. I heard about this probably maybe 8 or 10 months ago from June Lemon. And she and I have discussed it quite a bit. She's very excited about doing this project and mentioned to me at some point along the way that they were interested in having somebody on the board that wasn't a dog owner / dog lover to give that perspective. And she asked me if I would be interested, and I told her yes.
Oh, how very interesting. Okay, so you do not own any dogs, is that?
I do not own a dog.
Okay, all right. Alderwoman Kelly, do you see the mayor?
I do not. Oh, there he is.
Okay,
Yes,
Thank
I'm
you.
here, Madam Chair. I apologize for being late. I'm so used to the 7 o'clock meetings that I just assumed 7. But then I
Right.
said, no, 6:30.
That's okay, Mayor. We'll let that go by. Kathy just gave us a quick overview of June Lemon mentioning this particular advisory board. So we'll let you give us a history as to why you would like Kathy to be part of the Animal and Dog Park Advisory Board.
Well, Kathy has already spoken to you a little bit. She's very community involved. She's a massage therapist and has been for a long, long time. Amber Logue, who's the chair of the committee, has said that she thinks it's a good idea to have a non-dog owner on the committee, which I agree with. And in that effort, we found Kathy Abel, who's again very interested, and therefore, given her long history here in Nashua and her community involvement, I think she will be a good fit for the non-dog owner participant we'd like to have on that board.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone from the committee have any questions for Kathy or the mayor? No one? Alderman Lopez?
I'm on mute. I'm sorry. I was looking for hands and I was on mute. Alderman Clemmons has his hand up.
Okay, Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you. Yes, so you're not a dog owner, but are you a pet owner?
Yes, I have a cat, an indoor cat.
Okay, me too. Yeah, so we're in the same boat. I love all animals, but I could not be a dog owner. I like my cat because she can take care of herself. So,
Exactly.
but no, I appreciate you coming forward and participating in the committee, because we need as many voices as we can from a diverse set of backgrounds. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Clemmons. Anyone else?
Alderman Clee and Alderman Lopez.
Okay, do Alderman Lopez first and then Alderman Clee.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for volunteering. I noticed that you have in your letter, it says you have 4 daughters. You have some experience as a committee chair in the past. So I'm excited about having somebody who has those kind of family connections and experience. I think it's a good idea to have at least one non-dog owner participate in the Animal Park Advisory Board, because it makes sure that all perspectives are being heard, and that people really have the sense that there's a fair representation on the board, rather than a bunch of animal owning enthusiasts trying to tell them what to do. This is more representative of the whole community. So I appreciate you stepping forward with that. I know it'd be a little bit unusual to be on an advisory board where you don't have the specific animal in question, but you have pets. The perspective is valuable, and I think your experience is as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. Alderman Clee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For all those that are listening, Ms. Abel is one of my constituents. I've gotten to know her over the past few years, and she's an incredible person as far as with the community and so on. She's also very much into her environment and making sure that things are good for our community. You can drive by Kathy's home during the early fall, and you will see beautiful sunflowers that are just growing straight up in her front lawn that she never planted. They just came to live with her, and she will do everything to keep take care of them. But in all honesty, she walks around the community. She's very in tune to our community in general. So I think she's going to be a good voice on the committee, and I look forward to hearing her opinions, and I hope that you see fit to put her on this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Well, thank you, Ms. Abel. Your appointment will be voted on later on in the meeting. And thank you for willing to sit on the Animal and Dog Park Advisory Board. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so next interview is the Conservation Commission Mayor Maya Friday.
Yes, yes, Madam Chair. Excuse me, I've nominated Maya Friday for a position on the Conservation Commission, for a student position on the Conservation Commission. Sherry Dutsey is the chair of the commission, a very active chair. I don't know if she's on the call or not, but we've talked several times about having students involved with the commission, and Maya would not be the first one. Maya Friday is a 9th grader at Nashua South. She, before attending Nashua South, she did go to the Academy of Science and Design, where she took classes related on the environment, and she did field work as well. Sherry has talked with her at some length about the position, and I know that Maya will, and we'd love to have the students involved, so I know Maya will do a good job and represent for several years, hopefully, because she's only a 9th grader. Will be able to help us out at the Conservation Commission.
Okay, thank you. And Maya, I heard you earlier, so would you like to tell us why you'd like to sit on the Conservation Commission?
Yes, so I'm interested in fulfilling the student position because I believe that the conservation of Nashua's natural land is essential for the environment. I'm particularly interested in like the maintenance of the land, such as the Terrell Conservation Area, which I have walked on, and the protection of wetlands. And prior to this interview, I have attended a meeting of the Conservation Commission earlier in October, and I'm personally very interested in environmentalism as a whole.
Thank you. Is anyone from the committee have any questions for Maya? Alderman Kelly?
I was looking to see if there were any hands. I got Alderman Lopez with his hand up.
Yeah, I was just looking for, there's in the mayor's communications, so there'd be an email or a letter. I didn't see it, but I just wanted to thank you for being willing to step up and volunteer in this way, particularly as a teenager and a high school student. I'm sure you have a lot of other things that you need to be balancing. It's not an easy time to be a student. So, but it shows that you're forward thinking and you recognize that, you know, things like this need to be taken care of or nobody else will do it. So thanks for stepping forward to help as a steward.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Alderman Lopez. Is there anyone else that would like to ask Ms. Friday a question?
I would like to make a comment, not a question.
Sure, Alderwoman Kelly.
Thank you. I also wanted to say thank you for stepping up. I served on this committee my first 2 years. It's a really great group of people, and they do a lot of really interesting things. You learn about a lot of science, but also, like you said, making sure that we preserve the beauty of some of those protected lands that we've put together here in Nashua. We've really been thoughtful about that, and we need to continue being thoughtful. So thank you for stepping up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Friday. It's wonderful to see young people stepping up and wanting to be part of the community and the things that are going on. And of course, conservation is a very big, important part of what takes place in this community. So your nomination will also come up at the end, and we look forward to seeing your swearing in a couple of weeks. Thank you. Mayor, do you have anything else before?
No, Madam Chair, that the other appointments are all reappointments, so they won't, you know, they're not scheduled for interviews. So
right.
And so that's all I have.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor. You have a good evening.
All right, you too. Thank you,
Thank
Maya,
you.
and thank you, Kathy.
Okay. Okay, applications to license hawkers, peddlers, vendors license.
There are none.
Okay, appointments by the mayor. Alderwoman Kelly?
I move to recommend the following confirmation, new appointments to the Animal and Dog Park Advisory Board, Kathy Abel with a term to expire October 1st, 2023. The following new appointment to the Conservation Commission, Maya Friday with a term to expire May 31st, 2021. And the following reappointments to the Cultural Connections Committee, Samba Halkos with a term to expire July 30th, 2023. And Lauren Ozowski with a term to expire December 31st, 2022 by roll call.
Okay, you've heard the motion. Is there any questions or concerns? Okay, would you please call the roll?
Alderwoman Karen.
Yes.
Alderman Clemmons.
Yes.
Alderman Lopez. Alderman Lopez? Did we lose him?
Is he on mute?
No, I don't see him. We might have lost him.
Okay.
Alderman Kelly is a yes. Alderman Cleaver?
Yes.
That's 4 yeas.
4 yeas. Okay. All right. Motion passes, and those two ladies will be sworn in at the next aldermanic meeting. Unfinished business.
We have before us 020-032, reducing the fine for overnight parking violations.
Okay. So I think we want to take it off the table and to hold it till our joint meeting with Infrastructure Committee, which takes place in about 5 minutes.
I think we might need to just hold it. I mean, the agenda doesn't have it as tabled. I think it went to
table
because it went to the aldermanic board and then they kicked it back, right?
Yep, you're right. So let's just hold and let's see if it's on the other. Okay, it's on the agenda for the infrastructure. So then, do we have any general discussion?
Oh, you're moving on to general discussion. I gotcha.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, motion. Yeah, okay. New business resolutions.
I actually have general discussion. I was going to
Okay,
ask
but we
before
have
the.
no.
Sorry.
Okay, no, I just looked. We need to do new business resolutions, but we have none.
Yep.
We have new business ordinances. We have none. And we're not taking anything else off the table, so we're into general discussion. Anyone?
I would like to speak. I don't see
Okay,
anyone else.
Alderwoman Kelly. Okay, thank you.
I wanted to ask before the mayor went off whether or not we were going to be equal opportunity with the animal advisory board and put someone on who owns chickens. I have chickens and eggs, so you know if we need someone, just thought we should consider that.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe we could send it into mayor as an email and see what happens. How's that?
May I be recognized?
Alderman Lopez.
So Alderman Kelly is bucking for change here, I think.
I'm not going there.
I just want to know, can I bring my chickens to the dog park?
Yeah, we should definitely talk about that and whether that's a good idea. I'm sure the dogs would love it, but the chickens might not.
I think that would have to come up to at their advisory board meeting.
Yeah,
Right,
put it under the topic of, do you want food delivered?
Alderman Clemens has his hand up as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
Alderman Clemens?
I think the answer to this question will be answered by whether or not we know if the chicken or the egg came first.
Chicken definitely comes first. I've had my chickens for 8 months and I just started getting eggs.
There you go. You have the answer.
But will they be able to cross the road? There's all these questions.
Okay.
In all
anyone
seriousness,
else?
I think that's a good point, Alderman Kelly. I agree with you on that one, and I think there's a lot of opportunities to expand that committee and have it go into different areas that we might not think of, especially because we have a lot of pet stores in Nashua. I think we have 2 or 3 of them, and they sell reptiles, they sell fish, they sell different things like that. And I think every once in a while, most people are responsible pet owners, but every once in a while you find Snippy the alligator in the river, and we want to make sure that people are being responsible and that kind of thing. So no, I agree.
Alderman Cleaver has his hand up, Jude.
Okay, all right. Alderman Cleaver.
Yeah, just wondering why the chicken crossed the road.
We're still waiting. Okay. Do we have any public comment?
I don't
Anyone
see
there?
any members of the public.
Okay, remarks by the alderman. I think we already heard about the chickens, so.
I'm sorry. Gotta have a little fun.
I know. No need for non-public. Okay, could I have a motion, Alderwoman Kelly?
Joint committee with an infrastructure.
I'm sorry, what?
Did you hear me?
We're going to adjourn.
Yeah, she's on mute.
No.
I'm not on mute. Can you guys not hear me?
No. Okay, so you're going to make a motion to adjourn, and then we will go into meeting with infrastructure.
All right, I move to adjourn. By roll call.
Okay. Motion to adjourn. Go ahead.
Alderman Karen,
Yes.
Alderman Clevens,
Yes.
Alderman Lopez,
No.
Alderwoman Kelly says yes. Alderman Cleaver.
Yes.
Okay.
We have
So,
4 yeas and 1 nay.
Okay, the regular meeting of the Personnel Committee ended at 6:56, and we will be going into a joint meeting with infrastructure at 7 o'clock. Thanks, everyone. So, Shoshana? Hello?
Can you hear me?
Hey, good evening. Got a call to order. the meeting of the Committee of Infrastructure, which will be held jointly with the Personnel Administration and Affairs Committee. This is Wednesday, October 28th at 7 p.m. via teleconference. As chairman of the Committee of Infrastructure, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of COVID-19 pandemic, in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this public is authorized to meet electronically. Please note there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video and other electronic means. To access Zoom, please refer to the agenda or the city's website for the meeting link. To join by phone, dial 1-929-205-6099 with a meeting ID number of 818-3046-7784, passcode 904784. The public may also view the meeting via channel 16. We previously gave notice to the public of the necessary information for assessing the meeting through public postings. Instructions have also been provided on the city's website at www.nationalnewhampshire.gov and publicly noticed in City Hall and at Nashua Public Library. If anybody has a problem assessing the meeting via phone or channel 16, please call 603-821-2049 and they will help you connect. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting via the methods mentioned above, the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there's anyone in the room with you during the meeting, which is required under the right to know law. We're going to have both clerks of both committees to share the attendance, and we'll start with Alderman Schmidt. So Alderman Schmidt and members of the Personal Administrative Affairs Committee, when your name is called, can you state the reason why you could not attend, confirm that you can hear the proceedings, and state who was present with you yourselves? Will the clerk of the infrastructure please call the roll?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. Alderman at Large Michael B. O'Brien Sr.
Present, I can hear the proceedings and I am alone.
Alderman Thomas Lopez.
I'm here. I can see and hear everybody, and I'm alone.
Alderman Jan Schmidt. I am alone in the office and I can hear everyone. Alderman Ernest Jetty.
I'm here. I can hear the proceedings and I'm staying safer at home with my wife.
Alderman David C. Tenza.
I am present. I can hear everyone and I'm alone.
And I'll continue if I may. Alderman June M. Karen.
Yes, I am here. I can hear you and I'm alone.
Alderman at Large Ben Clemens.
I am here. I can hear everybody, and currently I am by myself.
Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly.
Here I'm alone. I can hear everyone.
And Alderman Skip Cleaver.
I'm here and I'm alone and I can hear the proceedings.
All are in attendance tonight, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And also in attendance, we have Tim Cummings, Economic Development Director, Jill Stanfield of the City Parking Department, and also for Alderman, we have our President, Laurie Wilshire, Alderman Laurie Wilshire, Patricia Klee, Alderman Klee. Is there any other Alderman? Alderman Dowd is also present. And hopefully I got everybody.
Harriet Gathright.
Oh, sorry, there you are. Excuse me. We have also my Ward 9 compadre, Alderman Harriet Gathright. Also in attendance is Director Sarah Marchant, who is also in attendance, which is leads us now into public comment. If we got everybody, members of the public, this is your opportunity to speak. Is there anybody in the public that is in the queue that wants to bring anything to the board? Seeing none, on the just to give you an outline to join committee, we have now with two things approaching. Our committee, the infrastructure committee, meets generally towards the end of the month. As everybody knows, next month it will be coming into Thanksgiving, and yes, boys and girls, in December towards the end of the month, Santa Claus will be coming to town, despite the COVID. So therefore, we're going to try to cram in as much as we possibly can to lighten the load so that all members of the committee would be able to partake with their families and everything. So that being said, we have scheduled and working with Director Marchand, she has made herself available to come up and do a presentation. So without objections, I'm going to suspend the rules and allow the presentation by Director Marchand and Transportation Planner Julie Christmas, and to give a brief update on the Heritage Rail Trail East Grant Project after the agenda was prepared. And with that, no objection, I'll turn the presentation to Director Marchand.
Thank you so much, Alderman O'Brien. I'm here with Julie Chismis, the Transportation Planner, to talk to you about the East Heritage Rail Trail. This is a project that the grant was actually awarded in 2018, and we have made some substantial progress. It is an LPA state mandated process. So what we're here tonight to do is to present you the preferred alternatives. So we've got through preliminary design, we've got to look at the different alternatives, and we have recommended alternatives that we'd like to move forward with. And so we're here just to show you that very brief, hopefully, presentation tonight, and answer any questions you have about what we'd like to move forward with design-wise. So with that, I would love to introduce Julie Chismis, and she will share her screen to get the presentation started.
Hi there. I just want to get my screen sharing.
It's there.
All right, perfect. So thank you so much, Director Marchand and all the aldermen. I really appreciate your time this evening and squeezing us in so that we can present our proposed action on the Heritage Rail Trail. As Sarah said, I'm going to try to be brief. So just to give you a little background, this project started in the 1990s to provide an alternative bicycle and pedestrian route to the congested East and West Hollis streets. We acquired our first grant in 1993. It was a federal transportation enhancement grant, and that was used to purchase land and construct the Heritage Rail Trail West that begins just east of Simon Street and extends about 1.3 miles to Main Street, just by City Hall. We then got two more transportation enhancement grants, one in 2005 and one in 2009, and that allowed us to purchase the rail trail parcels east of Main Street that will become the Heritage Rail Trail East. But we needed some money to design and construct that. So in 2017, we applied for a congestion mitigation and air quality improvement grant, and we were awarded it. So that brings us to this evening. We have about $1.15 million in funding, 80% of which is federal, and that does require a 20% match of city funds. So just to share with you the extent of the project, as I said, it begins pretty much where the Heritage Rail Trail West ends at Main Street and extends approximately 3/4 of a mile easterly along East Hollis Street and terminates just about at the intersection of East Hollis and Denton Street. CMA engineers are the consultants that were hired to conduct the engineering study and develop the designs for this project, and they've broken it up into 5 segments. The first segment is Main Street to Quincy Street. The second is Quincy Street to Spruce Street, and these are just images of where the trail will be constructed behind the various buildings. Segment 3 is Spruce Street to Commercial Street. As you can see, it goes in front of Wendy's on Howard Street and then behind Fisher Auto Parts and behind the fire station. Segment 4 is the Commercial Street Bridge, which we will be repurposing as part of the trail. And then segment 5 is Commercial Street to East Hollis Street, Denton Street. again, behind Henry Hanger and Rapano Stoneworks. So we are currently in the engineering study phase of the project, and that involved initially a local concerns meeting that we actually held in person last year in October. And we heard, from the neighborhood about what they wanted to see for the trail design and also some concerns they had. The engineering study also involves a detailed survey of the parcels that were acquired and also an analysis of the existing conditions. All that information is taken and turned into an alternatives analysis of things that we can do with this trail, and conceptual designs are developed. That brought us to the proposed action meeting, where we shared those alternatives with the public through a virtual Zoom meeting on September 22nd of this year. And again, we're presenting them to you this evening. Once we have a proposed action approved, we will finalize the engineering study and submit it and the environmental documents to DOT for their review. Hopefully they will issue a notice to proceed that allows us to move on to preliminary design, which is the next phase. And following that, we would move into final design and then construction. So alternatives that were developed through the alternatives analysis process are shown here. We have the no build alternative, which we really aren't going to do because we have the land and we want to build a trail. And then there are 6 other alternatives beyond that. The first is just the development of a basic rail trail. So basic trail elements, needed landscape elements, and a basic retrofit of the commercial street bridge. Alternative 2 would replace that basic bridge retrofit under alternative 1 and enhance the retrofit, give us a few more years out of it. Alternative 3 would completely replace that commercial street bridge. Alternative 4 would build a crossing at Main Street where the rail trail joins Main Street and directly across to the Heritage Rail Trail West segment, which is something we heard in the local concerns meeting. Alternative 5 would enhance a couple of the crossings that have higher traffic volumes, enhancements for pedestrian safety and bicyclist safety. And then alternative 6 would be over and above the basic landscape elements that are required for the trail. So we looked at all the alternatives with the consultants and with our steering committee, and we decided to move forward with alternative 1, the basic rail trail, but we do want to take advantage of the enhanced bridge retrofit option to get a few more years out of the bridge. And then also put in the enhanced crossings for safety benefits. The bridge replacement and the direct Main Street crossing and the enhanced landscaping I will touch on as we go through to explain why we aren't moving forward with those. So for the basic rail trail elements, we'll be constructing a 10-foot wide paved trail with 2-foot wide gravel shoulders. The only exception will be there will be a colorized trail between Quincy Street and Mason Street, and that's to visually separate the trail area as it is a little narrower. We will be retaining the concrete sidewalk in front of Wendy's along Howard Street that I showed earlier. We'll be building a divider island at the Main Street intersection, and we'll be installing formalized ADA compliant crossings at the 4 crossings that the trail makes with the streets of Spring Street, Quincy Street, Mason Street, and Spruce Street. And so, as I mentioned, alternative 4 was a direct crossing at Main Street. And that would be, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but that would be where the rail trail joins Main Street. It would go directly across and join the Heritage Rail Trail West. And that's only about 50 feet from the existing crosswalk and pedestrian signal at the East Hollis Street and Main Street intersection. And so the consultants just didn't feel like that was a really good use of funds, and they had concerns about the safety where it is such a short distance between the existing intersections. So the divider island will encourage people to use the existing sidewalk, go to the pedestrian signal that's already there and cross over and then join the Heritage Rail Trail West. For landscape elements, alternative 1 includes lighting that matches the existing pole and luminaires that are on the Heritage Rail Trail West. We'll be using 60-watt LED lights with occupancy sensors to dim the lighting when there isn't anybody on the trail. And there will be full cutoff for dark sky friendly. For plantings, we'll be clearing the overgrown and invasive vegetation and planting trees that will provide shade where appropriate. And also the trees will help us delineate the corridor and help mitigate air quality. Again, this is a congestion mitigation and air quality grant, so that is important to us. And then for fencing, there are 3 different types of fencing that we'll be installing. There'll be corridor delineation fencing to help prevent encroachment from neighboring properties, and also to just, clearly define where the trail exists and not have anybody go into abutting properties. There'll be privacy fencing behind the fire station to just protect their break area that they currently enjoy. And there'll be security fencing to separate the trail from the active rail line around the Henry Hangar building. Alternative 2, we are also proposing to add to the proposed action, and that, as I mentioned, would be an enhanced bridge retrofit that would give us about a 35 to 40 year design life of the bridge. That is on top of, that's over and beyond what the basic retrofit would provide, which is about a 25-year design life. The main differences between the 2 retrofits is the enhanced retrofit will completely remove the existing steel rails and all existing timber components and install a brand new nail laminated or stress laminated timber deck on the existing girders. Finally, alternative 5 is being proposed as part of the proposed action, and that will install rectangular rapid flashing beacons at Spring Street and Spruce Street, where we have higher traffic volumes. And these are currently installed in the city at Concord Street, Main Street Bridge, a couple other locations, several other locations actually. So it's something that we are familiar with and we really feel will improve the safety of those crossings. Alternative 6, I am mentioning because we don't currently have the funding for it, but the landscape architects came up with some really great ideas for ways that we can really make the trail shine should funding become available in the future. So I just want to take a minute and go over those real quick. They have designed a pocket park at the Main Street Gateway that has accent paving, benches, wayfinding, bike racks, maybe planting beds for community gardens or some other type of garden. And that would really be a welcoming entrance into this section of the rail trail. They've also proposed an Irish Acres pocket park that would build on the history of the neighborhood around the Howard Street area. It would be a nice rest spot along the trail and provide an opportunity for public art and maybe some education about the history of the area. And finally, a third pocket park is proposed around Henry Hangar, which would serve as a gateway to the Heritage Rail Trail at the eastern end and also provide a great amenity for future housing development. In this image, they're showing a repurposing of the rail ties that are currently, along the alignment that we will need to remove as part of the project to build the paved trail. So it'd be a really great way to repurpose the rail ties and again, show the history of the area. Finally, enhanced landscaping is proposed, and the trail really offers a wealth of opportunities for public art, either on the trail surface, on adjacent buildings, with the fencing, within the pocket parks, and that will help really create a sense of place and also reflect, again, the local history and the culture of the neighborhood that the trail goes through, which is something that we did here at the local concerns meeting. So to kind of wrap it all up, the selected proposed action officially are Alternative 1, the basic rail trail, Alternative 2, enhanced bridge retrofit, Alternative 5, enhanced crossings. And those sum up to about $341,000 over our current budget. We have already started discussions with our DOT project manager about obtaining additional funding for this project. And he was, I would say, positive. So there is a good chance that we can obtain that additional funding. We'll be having a follow-up conversation with him once the proposed action is approved by the city and the estimate finalized. So one other thing that I'm showing as a selected proposed action would be an add alternative, which add alternate rather, which is Alternative 3, a bridge replacement. That was proposed at one point, but there are concerns that there are the existing bridge has some historical elements and that may not be a cost-effective option given the history of the bridge. So if it needs to be, we want to be able to have the funding to do it if the existing bridge isn't found to be sound enough to be retrofitted. But I just want to throw that out there. That's why that bridge replacement is as listed as an alternative. So alternatives 1, 2, and 5, we really feel do provide the best balance of improvements and provide a great trail for all users. It does consider the current and future trail needs and the maintenance requirements. The width of the trail and the bridge that are being proposed will allow for plowing in the winter. This will complement the Heritage Rail Trail West and be in keeping with the look and feel of that trail. It does also align with the master plan, and it really provides the best design for the dollars spent. Should the stars align and everything go well, we will be following this proposed action meeting with a submittal to DOT of the engineering study. Following their review and a notice to proceed, we'll conduct the preliminary design and complete that by January, then move into final design, advertise in May of 2021, and start construction in summer or fall. And I kind of preface that with if everything goes perfect. And I say that because DOT is taking a little longer to review their plans and get back to their communities. And because of that, well, I should mention they have a staffing shortage and a hiring freeze due to the pandemic. So it's there are reasons why they are delaying, good reasons, but that could push out our advertisement date. And if it pushes really any farther, we may want to consider advertising in the fall or winter of 2021, 2022 in order to get the best prices, because that is the best time to advertise for pricing purposes. So to wrap it all up, I do have a proposed motion that is to approve the proposed action for the Heritage Rail Trail East project, and I would welcome any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Are there any questions? In order, we'll first take questions from members of the Infrastructure Committee. Is there any questions by any members of the Infrastructure Committee? And I'm on thumbnail, so I'm not really seeing everybody. So please speak up if you do have a question.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Alderman.
Oh, yes. Yes, thank you. Alderman Tenza.
Thank you. Julie, you had mentioned that there's a bit of a shortfall. About when would we have to secure the funding to make that up or come up with it on our own through the city?
Sure. So we have funding secured with the appropriate match to get us through the different design phases. So up through advertising. We would then need to have the funding for construction once we move forward with that phase. So, you know, that might be another reason why we want to advertise next winter versus this May. Or fall, not this May, but next May, sorry.
If I could add on to that, please. Even the existing grant that we have not fully matched. We've only provided the match thus far for the engineering design portion. So we will be looking at the match as part of the CIP budget for 2022 going forward. And so we are hoping to have a better understanding from DOT this winter, hopefully by January, of the additional funds that they can put forward towards this project. As these funds, again, this was approved in 2018 with cost estimates then. We've seen a 30% increase in many construction costs since then. And so these are costs that we think they are very likely to pick up. So once we know exactly how much DOT is willing to help us with, then we can look at what our 20, again, that's an 80-20 match. So what the rest of our 20% match would need to be. An 80-20 match, it's still a pretty good deal for the city, and these grant funds are critical to getting the project done.
Okay, thank you. Any other members of the committee have a question? Yes. Who's that? Alderman Lopez?
Alderman Lopez, yep.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. Yes.
So first I want to thank Director Marchant and Julie for all the work they've been doing on this. Is one of the first projects that we talked about when I first took office. And I mean, as a professional pedestrian, I'm pretty excited about having more walkability in the city. I use the rail trail very, very often. And it's very important, not only for people who are walking to and from work, but people who are maybe scooting to and from doctor's appointments and picking up their prescriptions, getting their groceries. It contributes a lot towards independence. So I'm really excited to see this moving forward. I'm curious as to whether we have or whether we're anticipating plans for how to maintain snow removal, or whether or not we're looking at the same kind of like adopt a block system that we're using on this side of the rail trail.
That's a great question. I'll start with that one. Yes, as part of this grant, we are promising to maintain it. And that's one of the reasons why it's so critical that this is a 10-foot wide paved trail. We have every intention of being able to maintain this for snow purposes. After, it's going to be like the sidewalks after the storm, but we should be able to plow this with a truck and be able to maintain this for winter maintenance going forward. As a condition of the grant, we have promised to do so.
Just to follow up, because based on what you're saying, is the current rail trail not 10 feet wide in some of the areas? Is that a problem?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think it is mostly 10 feet wide.
I can speak
but
to that.
It does depend on, thank you, Julie. The maintenance of that other rail trail, the city has been, I think, doing better in the past couple of years. I agree.
The city has been doing well. I see the sidewalk plow doing that plowing. I was just curious whether that was a challenge that we should be looking at.
I can speak to that.
Thank you, Tim.
So if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes, absolutely, please.
So Tim Cummings, Director of Economic Development. So parking actually maintains the existing heritage trail for the most part. And it's something we took on just within the last, I would say 2, maybe 3 years at the most. Jill, I'm sure, will know the exact day because she took it under her purview under duress, and she reminds me of that often. I
celebrate that day with joy.
We actually just bought a special piece of equipment last winter with the specifications in mind to be able to take care of the heritage trail to what I would say is the existing one that goes, I guess that would go west. I can't speak to whether it's 10 feet or not. You can put a pickup truck down the existing one, though it's difficult because of the separators that are put up to keep vehicles from traveling on that road regularly. So you actually need to have a special piece of equipment that can fit between the barriers to actually make it efficient for our snow operation removal. And we do have that piece of equipment on hand. So so long as it stays in theory with what it is to the east, we should be able to do the west without a problem. Did you catch that, Jill?
Thank you, Director Marchand.
I would also point out that the Western Rail Trail also has a lot of gardens on the side, so probably a good thing we just don't drive a city plow down there. But I appreciate the work and the planning that's gone into both of those. And I know it's very much appreciated by people trying to travel to and from the bus station and all those places. So I anticipate the same kind of use once we're able to connect places like Marshall Street to, Quincy Street and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to welcome all aldermen. If anybody else out there does have a question, Alderman Wilshire.
Thank you. So, Julie, you talked about this going over by Henry Hanger and ending somewhere around Denton Street. It doesn't go across East Hollis Street, does it?
It does not.
Good. Because I was going to say that's really a tight, busy area, that East Hollis Street corridor there. So if it's going behind Henry Hanger or alongside Henry Hanger, is it going in front of on the East Hollis Street side or behind on the Temple Street side?
It's going behind.
Okay. And so that fits in with the new development and everything that's going on over there, right? Yeah. Okay. I'm just glad it's not going across East Hollis Street. Thank you for that.
Anybody else questions?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Alderman Jettie.
So, Julie, you said something I didn't quite understand, talking about the bridge over Commercial Street.
Yes.
You said something about history, the history being some problem there. Can you clarify what you meant by that?
Sure. So all of these projects have to go before the Cultural and Historic Board up the state. And so they will review it, and there is some potential that I'm so sorry, I'm not an engineer, but there are elements of the bridge that may be considered a historic resource. And so for that reason, we may not want to try to replace it. One reason why initially that was looked at as a possibility is there's a 75 plus design lifespan to a replaced bridge. So we did look at that out initially, but in follow-up conversations with the historic board, we have kind of backed away from that a little, unless, there is a reason that we absolutely have to replace it. But the engineers don't feel as though that's the case right now.
Okay, so if I could follow up.
Sure.
So when you say there are elements of the bridge that may have some historical significance, I'm trying to imagine, do you mean that there are elements of the bridge that are just old or unique or represent some era? Can you clarify that?
Go ahead, Sarah.
I can try and help, Alderman Jetty, if you want. For example, on another project in the city, there were timbers that the Historic and Cultural Commission considered historic and important. And so they wanted us to save those timbers to try and reuse them. And we tried to reuse them in another project, the bridge actually over the canal. But even though we deconstructed the bridge and saved those timbers, the timbers were then found to be loaded with creosote, which is not safe for humans and to be over water. And so we had to do the replacement. We had to do a new bridge anyways. So they have a very broad set of standards that they can use to define what may be historic or culturally important. And as this grant funding goes through them, they have the say in what is historic or culturally significant.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have a question?
That just brought up one more question for me. I don't even know if they have the answer, but if I may.
Yes, Alderman Lopez.
I've heard rumors that there was a speakeasy that creepy door underneath that bridge led to. Is that true, or is that just like some random shed? I know it's not active, but like, is that actually a historical thing, or is there any merit to that? Or
I kind of hope not, because it probably means we got to save it. But
I always thought it was like a running joke. Like I would not go in that door, but I don't know.
I understand that I believe it's Mr. Lapierre, who owns Rapano Stonework, has quite a bit of history of the area. He has been an active participant so far in this process, and I will certainly be continuing to speak with him about some of maybe the historic park areas or ways we can celebrate some of that heritage.
Okay.
So I don't know about that for sure, but he might be a resource to dig that rumor down for you.
I would love to see that area's history kind of be brought back to the surface, because it benefited the Tree Streets heavily to have those railroad murals put up and more recognition of its historical significance. And I think as we're doing the rail trail, we probably could do something similar there.
All right, thank you, Alderman Lopez. Anybody else? Seeing none, Alderman Lopez, I compliment you for noticing that, but I think that actual walkway, it's quite prevalent down in the Boston area as well, although many people down there wish it was a speakeasy, but I think that was probably access for the train crew and pedestrians to get up to one level, and they built that as part of the bridge work. But I'll go with the speakeasy myself.
I don't believe everything I'm told, but I figured I might as well ask.
Yeah, but also too, it is very historical, having worked at the Crown Hill Station that is there, and right along the rail bed, you can still see coal that fell off the original trains. So, and there's some switching devices that are still around there. So it does have a historical, but it segues into my next thing. You say that it's ending at Denton Street, and I know it's not related to this project, but maybe Director Cummings can say, we are also looking at the crossover from the bridge coming over from Hudson, to Bridge Street and the rail, possibly in the future and everything else. So this goes hand in glove with the future development. Can you hear me?
I can, yes, I
Yes,
can.
Okay. Maybe this could go with the future development, of that particular project.
I think you are, Mr. Chair, spot on. I think that the development of that neighborhood is changing. It's going to become more of a mixed use, higher multifamily type of density type neighborhood that's going to need to have amenities like a trail that connects to a future rail station. And this is good future planning that would allow for that to occur. And we would have a great transportation tool that's not just focused on roads and automobiles, that will be able to help move people to jobs and to their residents.
Very good. Thank you. Any other further questions? The chair does have one more to Ms. Chismis. Are you looking for an unbinding approval of this particular board to say tally ho with the project?
Yes, we are looking for your endorsement of the 3 alternatives that are moving forward as the proposed action for this trail.
Okay, the legalities of this, it isn't on the agenda, but I refer the question to the president. Madam President, would a roll call be needed or to just to approve in, theory to continue with this particular project? Non-binding, of course.
Yeah, it would be non-binding. I mean, at this point, when you're not looking for us to allocate any resources or anything, just to agree with the concept of those alternatives you've come up with.
Yes.
Yeah, you can do a roll call on that.
Very good. Always very happy when we can get the legalities out of the way. Okay, on the particular project, will the clerk of infrastructure please call the roll? The question before us will be a non-binding question to continue on with the Heritage Rail Trail East Grant Project as presented this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alderman at Large, Michael O'Brien.
Yes.
Alderman Thomas Lopez.
Yes.
Alderman Jan Schmidt says yes. Alderman Ernest Jetty.
Yes.
Alderman David C. Tenza.
Yes.
Alderman June M. Karen.
Yes.
Alderman at Large Ben Clemens.
Yes.
Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly.
Yes.
And Alderman Skip Cleaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeas, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. And thank you very much, Director Marchand and Transportation Planner Chismis. I apologize if I muddled over your name earlier. I have a propensity for that sometimes. But thank you. We found the presentation to be very informative and it looks great. I'm having some strong inklings with the Irish section. I'm glad to see that neighborhood to be recognized. So I think that's very good there. So thank you again for coming this evening and giving us the presentation.
Thank you for
very much
squeezing us
having
in.
All right, moving along, communications.
There are none.
I do have one.
Oh, excuse me.
Yes,
From Jill
thank you.
Stansfield, from Jill Stansfield, Parking Manager. Response to questions on overnight bans with fines. Without objection, Chairman O'Brien, would you accept this communication?
Yes, thank you, and I'll place it on file. Thank you. Unfinished business.
We have ordinance 20-032, reducing the fine for overnight parking violation. Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, I don't know what to recommend on this.
Yeah, well, that's fine, and let's keep it open because I think at this particular point, we can see, because I think several ideas will be coming forward by various committee members. Just to rehash so everybody knows, this was originally heard by the Personal Administrative Affairs Committee. I think it did come out of that committee somewhat with a positive recommendation, and it went to the full Board of Aldermen. when it came to the full Board of Aldermen, additional information was provided, basically along the lines that it may have some detrimental effect of some of the revenue that has been generated. It does go kind of counterintuitive to a pending further study that the near and dear to several of us members on the infrastructure committee that you know that we are working on, and that is the parking issue that is involved with the city. As you know, the city has since the car was invented, had no overnight parking. And now that we're coming into this era where a lot of traditional two-family homes have been turned into apartments, the lot of linear feet that's in front of some of our structures there with the, being apartments is getting eaten up by parking. The overnight parking itself comes with some type of things to be concerned to members of the committee and to the Board of Aldermen. And that is also looking at trash removal, snow removal, and other different type of concerns. So therefore, the Infrastructure Committee was going to throw overnight parking into the mix and to have a parking study. But however, COVID-19 raised, as the plague usually does, the plague raises its ugly head and delayed a proper study. I would like to offer maybe perhaps that we could go to some form of compromise, and that would be to have split the parking study and have just in the initial overnight parking study. That was presented to us, just to remind members of the Infrastructure Committee, it was presented by Director Cummings in the past. We at that particular time said no, because at that particular time, we felt it would be better for that company, the vendor, to come up at one time and look at the whole general project as far as parking in general, including the overnight parking. It was more economical to do it once. But I don't see if it's going to be an issue, and if it's an issue to some of our aldermen who have doing their due diligence with their constituents, I don't see any objections to having the parking, an additional overnight parking study, but to make members of the committee to be aware that that could be at a little bit more of a premium price over what was originally proposed for the parking study. So with that segue, I'm going to shuffle off to Ruffalo and ask Director Cummings if he would like to come in and add to what I have just said. Director Cummings.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. As Alderman O'Brien, reiterated just a few moments ago, if it's the will and desire of this body, we absolutely could pull out the overnight parking task that we had bundled into the bigger study and make it a standalone project, with something we explored back in the summertime, late spring. We asked if there was an interest and an appetite at that time to do it. I want to say we got a quote from our vendor for something in the order of like $6,000 to $10,000 or something to that effect, and they were going to do it as a standalone item above and beyond the scope of work that we have them under contract for. That's on hold, and it's on hold for obvious reasons. So if that's of interest, that's something we absolutely could do. I would recommend going in that direction, only because it would give everyone some comfort and confidence about allowing for overnight parking to occur in the city in some fashion, in a little bit more of a managed or organized way. My sense is there's, and this is part of what I would like to do, is go through a consensus building exercise with each of you to get a real understanding as to where your wards are on this issue, or where the city is as a whole, because ultimately I'd like to see a solution put in place so we're not revisiting this issue every what it seems like now, started out once every year to 6 months to something that we're seeing every 3 months now. And it's not productive. So that's why having that mini study done with a report, to provide us some guidance and with some professional expertise, third party would help give everyone some information to make a decision. But ultimately it's a cultural decision that this community needs to make as to whether you want to have overnight parking in your community. There's no right or wrong to it. And, depending on what you want to do, we can tell you the best practices and we can point out how some communities are doing it and what makes sense. And we can tell you how it's going to affect the community or the city itself from a governmental operation standpoint. Putting that issue aside, just to speak to the legislation at hand, I just want to make sure it's clear that if it's voted, it is going to the impact of the vote if this legislation passes favorably is, at least for some time until we can get the account and the services stabilized, we would not be able to actively enforce overnight parking throughout the city. We wouldn't be able to take that on. We would try to do our best to do it as quickly as possible once it stabilizes. But we had just gotten this service and this account stabilized when we took it over from the previous department that was running it. We had just started to get some traction and started to be able to manage it effectively and put some goals in place. And so, I just want to make sure everyone realizes that we would, need to push pause a little bit on our end from an operational standpoint, reassess, maybe make some adjustments. One of those adjustments would definitely be that we wouldn't be doing any active overnight enforcement. And then once we can recalibrate, we could see what type of service delivery we could make. So anyway, I guess the last comment I'll make is, and I think this is the memo that Jill Stansfield provided. The $25 fine is not out of norm with what area communities charge. So this is the standard fine that like communities in the area assess to people who receive a ticket. The $10 would be an exception to that. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The chairman does recognize Alderman Clemmons in the queue. If Alderman Clemmons could stand by for a second. The chair does have one question for Director Cummings, and that is part of this parking study. In looking at if we did agree to go to tonight to overnight parking, the fact that this is a bigger issue that I think some others are really looking at. In other words, this has many tentacles as part of the problems with this. Some of this may lead into zoning type of concerns and other type of things that may need to be addressed. And would we get that and get those recommendations, particularly if we had to get into permitted parking and zoning for parking zones for different areas of the city? And is that some of the questions that would be answered by this particular vendor if they came in and give us the one-time solution, not a multifaceted solution, the the correct way to do this?
That's absolutely true, Mr. Chair. I mean, right now we take a one-size-fits-all approach essentially for the community. And this community is very different depending on where you are. And so, it would make sense to make something a little bit more, appropriate for each section or area of the city. So it can provide the right level of service and the right need that maybe, one may look for. There are definitely zoning issues that are going to need to be addressed or, understood how we want to handle it. And so, developing a program and, which is, permits usually to handle the overnight parking is usually what communities do when they decide to allow overnight parking to occur. They allow on-street parking to occur in some fashion. Just allowing it unregulated, communities of this size, community of this density, they typically don't allow for that because of the urban problems that may arise. You know, it was mentioned earlier, snow removal, trash removal, you know, fire safety issues, driveways being blocked. You know, there are various issues that could come up that, you know, are very serious, potentially very serious issues that, you know, you want to make sure you have a plan in place so you're being responsible. So, you know, we're providing the best service possible. Absent that, it could be a little bit of a free-for-all. And if that happens, you know, we could be here in a couple of years saying, well, maybe we should put a permit system in, and that's okay too. That will just be the externality that comes about.
Thank you, Director Cummings. Chair recognizes Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of questions. Some to, I think, either Ms. Stansfield or to Mr. Cummings, and then a couple to the sponsor of the legislation. I believe he's on. I think Alderman Laws is on. But I'll start with this first question, and that is, do we know how many of the resident overnight parking permits are sold currently right now for both French Hill and the Tree Street area?
So Jill Stansfield may have that more at her fingertips. I just want to caution, COVID has thrown a little hiccup in our typical programming of that because of COVID related reasons. Our process has been delayed a little bit. So this may not be as accurate of a figure, but I'd ask Jill if she has that at her fingertips.
So I do not have the breakdown between the Tree Streets versus the French Hill area. And as Director Cummings just mentioned, we have had, due to COVID, a little bit of a hiccup in the process. We're actually helping the city clerk's office out with taking over the process. So we're in the middle of a transition phase with that. But overall, we have somewhere in the neighborhood of about 400 permits that are issued currently between all of the areas.
Can I ask, is that, from what I remember from the original legislation, we had a cap of 400. Is that still the case?
A little higher now.
I believe so.
What it is? You know what the number is off the top of your head, or?
It's just a little higher. I'm going to say somewhere around 500 to 600, 600 at the most.
And do we ever, here's the bottom line, do we ever sell out?
My understanding in years past, Tree Streets does, French Hill does not.
So is it 500, is it 600 in each neighborhood, or is it 600 across the city?
600 in the aggregate across the, and I wouldn't say across the city, in the select.
In those two areas. So how did it, what do you mean then by the Tree Streets sells out? How can one area sell out if it's a citywide program?
So it's only on select streets that you're allowed to park, and it's only in select streets that you're allowed to apply for the permit. Mm-hmm. So based off of the orientation of those streets, you can say, you know, with some reason of confidence, that's a Tree Street permit as opposed to that's a French Hill type permit.
But there's nothing to prevent me, though, from taking my car and parking it on French Hill overnight if I have one of those permits, correct?
Just so long as you reside in appropriate residence.
If I reside in the Tree Streets, I can bring my car up to French Hill, park it overnight, stay at my buddy's house, and then in the morning I can drive back to the Tree Streets, right?
I believe that's accurate. That's correct.
So this is where I get concerned about, I think, some of the problem that we're having here. Because it's my understanding, and I don't want, and this is where I wanted to ask the sponsor if he could, elaborate a little bit more in detail. We have a program in place where if you live in one of the most densely populated neighborhoods, in the city, you can buy a permit to park overnight. So one of the things that I heard from the discussion was that people were getting ticketed because they could not, because they were leaving their car overnight. Are these folks that are, I guess my question is, are these folks that live outside of that area? And where are they leaving their cars that they're getting tickets? And the other part of it is, are any of these folks who are getting tickets employees of some of the establishments in the area? So I would direct those three questions, if I could, to Alderman Laws, if he's willing to take the answer.
Yes, thank you, Alderman Clemmons. Alderman Laws, would you like to, there's a question through the chair to you from Alderman Clemmons. Would you like to answer?
I would be grateful to. Thank you, Chairman O'Brien. I didn't write these down, so I'm going to pull them from memory. But I believe your first question was, where are these people getting ticketed? Why are they not getting ticketed? If there's a permit available, as far as I understand it, the permits aren't for every single street downtown. So, and which is completely understandable. Some of the streets legitimately are too narrow to have overnight parking, but there are many streets that should have overnight parking that don't. So the program itself, I don't believe, is comprehensive enough to cover all of those people. That's one thing. Another thing is, because of COVID and because of how much stress there's been on City Hall, some people have applied for permits and they didn't get them. Some people got the permit, but they never, got the physical copy of it. So there's just a bunch of like small nuances that are affecting people negatively. And I'll remind you of the presentation that we saw last night. We're talking about the one block of Nashua where the lowest socioeconomic group lives. So this $25 ticket is substantial to them. Second question, Ben, what was it?
The second question was, are any of the people who are getting tickets like employees of different places downtown?
Yeah. So that's actually a great question. And if I may lead into it by saying that one of the biggest regrets that I have is mentioning that people are discouraged from leaving their car downtown after they've had a few drinks. And it might encourage them to drive drunk, because that has become part of this conversation. And that's not really the biggest issue. The biggest issue, as far as I see it, is A, people who live in those neighborhoods who are getting ticketed and they just have no other options. And B, I mean, the ticketing program runs from midnight to 6 a.m. Last call in New Hampshire is 1 a.m. So you can go into work all night, walk to your car at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning when you're finished cleaning and doing the money and everything else, and you've got a $25 ticket on your car. And that happens quite often to many employees. I mean, you got to think of how many people work downtown. You're on the cusp of being late to work. You're not going to go park in the garage and then walk down. You're going to find a parking spot, and then next thing you know, you get a $25 ticket. So, I mean, those are the people who I'm including in this as well. But what was the third question, if you don't mind?
It wasn't, but I think you kind of answered my first two in one, and then that was my third. But I wanted to, Mr. Chairman, if I could just follow through.
I'm going to hold you because we do have Alderman Lopez in the queue. And if you're in total agreement, I'll let Alderman Lopez and come back to you.
Okay.
I can be patient. I mean, I don't mind.
Okay. Alderman Lopez has graciously yielded. Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you. I guess where I'm going on this is I'm wondering if it would make sense. Obviously, I think we've come to the conclusion that it would make sense for us to look at the overnight parking program as it exists now and kind of get the streets that were just excluded included in there. And we've done similar things in the past where former Alderman Schoeneman and I worked together on several of this, where what we would do is if there was a street that was too narrow or for whatever reason couldn't have the actual physical parking, we would include that street on the list of streets where somebody could get a permit, and then but they could park their car on the next street over or something like that in the neighborhood. And what that did was that alleviated some of the issues that we're talking about. And usually those streets would come up on a case-by-case basis where somebody would have a complaint and he would bring that forward. But I think a more comprehensive look at where those streets are within the neighborhoods would be good, and maybe we could kind of button that up. The other point I just want to make before I go is I think we might want to look at also allowing employees some kind of leverage, and I don't know how we would do that, but to ease that burden, because I agree that at 2 o'clock, if you're closing down a restaurant at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're still probably in there cleaning and getting everything ready for the next day. And so, you might not come out till 3, and when you do, there's a ticket there. So, so I think we need to address that. So I think we have a path forward. My last question is this, and I'll direct it to Director Cummings. What could we cut this fee to so that we could break even and have people continue to go out and enforce the overnight parking ban as it is right now?
I would have to do the math to see what that number would be. I guess I would caution you though, because we shouldn't be designing a program based off of the revenue or breaking even. It's about getting the behavior that you want. It's about getting the policy outcomes and the community that you want. So, I wouldn't. It would almost be to some degree the tail wagging the dog. So I would caution against that strategy. Of course, I can. Jill Stansfield and I could probably do the math and get a figure for you that would keep it to break even. But I don't know it. I wouldn't know it off the top of my head right now. I guess the question I would say is, what is the number that you felt comfortable assessing someone as a penalty for, not adhering to the norms that the community has outlined that they want to see?
I understand what you're saying, but the point of the matter is that I agree with what Alderman Laws was saying in that, the $25 is a lot to the person that gets the ticket. And when you've been hustling all night and to get a $25 in tips, and then you come outside and it's $25 ticket, that's an issue. So
can I speak to that?
Please let me finish. My point is this. The point that I'm trying to make is we need to come up with a comprehensive study to really look at the Tree Streets and the French Hill area, and maybe even Crown Hill, or maybe some other areas as well. And we need to look at that. But in the meantime, people are getting fined, and it's hurting them. So I also don't want to see someone lose their job over the fact that we've reduced the ticket to the point where we can't pay them, and then we don't have them go out on the street to do the job of making sure that people keep their cars off the street. So I'm trying to reach some kind of compromise here. And I would like an answer to my question, which is, what would be that ticket figure so that in the meantime, while we're studying this issue, we can also reduce the burden for that time being, and then come back to it when we have a study in the meantime. Thank you.
All right. Alderman Clemens, at this point, I'm going to remind you, we have a couple other people in the queue, other aldermen that would chose to speak. So we'll hold off that proverbial question and to do it, unless Director Cummings, did you want to have a response?
Well, I just wanted to follow up on a comment that was made because, I mean, and this goes to my point of why I think you should really think about this in a more comprehensive way before you take any action is because, and I'm going to use just the one off the top of my head. If the concern is employees in the downtown area getting ticketed, Portsmouth, New Hampshire has a pretty interesting program where they actually have a quote unquote downtown employee parking lot that only employees can park in. And that allows them to park for free in a certain location and not worry about paying for parking in general and then worrying about tickets. And that's something the community has endeavored to take on because they see this as a responsibility and a need to do. And that's a different type of strategy that was adopted as opposed to the one that's being contemplated tonight. So, and I'm not saying that that is the solution here, but it goes to my point of you really want to kind of think about this, explore other options to really solve the problems that you're looking to solve. Relative to the figuring out a rate of a ticket, the rate of a fine for a ticket so we can break even, that's going to be really hard to do because we don't operate under a quota system, and nor do I want to start a policy where I'm saying to Jill Stansfield and her team, you got to go out and write X amount of tickets because we have to break even. That is not, I think, good policy, and I wouldn't recommend it. And so that's going to be really tough for us to kind of figure out that, okay, $25 is tough, but if we bring it down to 15, and I know that if we send someone out at night and they write, and I'm making this up, 40 tickets, they wrote more tickets than they used to, but now I've got them at a dollar amount that will cover the costs of their providing that service. You know, I just don't know if that's really a good solution. And I caution you, if that's the direction you want to go, again, you know, we can do the math and we can get you what that figure is. I don't know it off the top of my head.
Thank you, Director Cummings. The chair now recognizes Patricia, Alderman Clee will be in the queue, and the chair recognizes Alderman Lopez.
I will be willing to be called Patricia Lopez if you would like. So I wanted to bring up a couple of alternatives that we have here because we are kind of approaching the sticking point where we really are looking at changing behaviors versus addressing financial issues, because those are basically two different issues. So we're also kind of divided between the concept of doing something now for the problems that we see right now, but doing something thoroughly with intention to make sure that we're developing policy. I did have a conversation with Director Cummings earlier today, and I think Alderman Tensa might be able to weigh in on this concept later, but this is an issue that definitely falls under human affairs, but it also, or personnel administrative affairs, but it also falls under infrastructure. And in the past, it's been handled by Planning and Economic Development Committee. As Director Cummings pointed out, this does keep rearing its head because constituents are bringing it up more and more and more. And we have not been able to do the data-driven study that we want. If we only look at it as where do we put permits and where do we not, what price should we set, we're still doing the same thing. There's other ways to approach the problem as well, such as some of the ideas that I had suggested to Director Cummings was identifying streets with little or no transportation value any longer and using them to augment areas that might not have on-street or have effective parking. We could look at redesigning the parking plan so that it's region specific. Instead of saying everybody who gets overnight parking has a pass for overnight parking, we could color code it. This was an idea we talked about in a previous infrastructure committee where French Hill gets green, the Tree Streets gets yellow. You could add employees and they could have blue. Like you could modify the system so that it's region specific. And then when people get their parking pass, they know that it works in a specific area. That would let employees have access to parking alternatives without giving them unilateral access to parking all over the neighborhoods, and vice versa. So there's a lot of things we can do in the future, but there's 3 different committees to be working through. There's different priorities and aldermanic agendas at work. So what I would propose and what I hope to get support for is creating a steering committee with representatives from each committee, which is focused on that of aldermen who have skin in this and are willing to commit to maybe a more regular meeting. They could work with a feasibility study or a traffic study and with the director of economic development to look at a more well-rounded approach rather than just revenue and parking and that type of thing. Because when we're trying to address behaviors, we need to understand there's different behaviors that are going on. And while some behaviors on Main Street may be things we need to regulate for Main Street purposes, there's going to be different behaviors on the number of streets that we also need to regulate. So that's one suggestion I have for confirming that this work continues and that we do follow through with the feasibility study, but we don't just wait for it to happen, because there are probably steps we can identify today as legislators if we sit down and focused on it. The second thing that I wanted to bring up was reducing the price of the overnight parking ticket isn't the only way to address the need that's happening in the most dire areas. We could also identify specific streets and say, we're limiting the scope of this from being downtown as it is defined by economic development, which is like all the way to the number of streets, and focus it more on the areas where people actually would be working late at night or would be traveling or transporting late at night. If we do change the scope of Alderman Law's original legislation, it will automatically reduce the amount of impact that it has on the ticketing and permitting budget, but it will also have the effect of changing the behaviors that we're trying to address. So I would caution that we not take this idea and run with it too far and say just Main Street, because you want to buffer between the residential streets and Main Street. If you allow free parking on Main Street or reduced fine parking, some people who are very close to that area might choose to park on those streets knowing there's less of a fine. Unlikely. If you reduce the parking rate too much, then people who don't have parking anywhere else may make that decision to leave their cars on Main Street or where it would impact the business. So what I would suggest the committee discuss as an alternative is, what would it look like if instead of all of downtown, we focused on Main Street and maybe the two proximate blocks to it as a pilot study that maybe only is intended to be used until January. We'll have a chance to continue the program if we see that it's not crippling the the parking department, and we'll have a chance to see that we're making a difference specific to people who need it, most immediately to the people who are making very limited income and need a boost to their business. I think it's important to remember that we have some COVID-19 specific crises that people are facing. So that justifies us making an unusual step, and it gives us time to study the issue a little bit more further as well. So I just wanted to put those ideas out on the table, both the idea of creating a steering committee that has a representative from each of those committees on it to take on a more in-depth look at this, and then likewise looking at the scope of this and trying to figure out exactly what we're trying to do, whether we're trying to help people who are residents or whether we are trying to help people who are looking for parking in a downtown area where there's none.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. Alderman Clay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for recognizing me. I love Alderman Lopez's idea about the steering committee. And while I'm not on any of these committees, I would love to be on it because this does strongly impact my ward, especially in the French Hill. And I also want to reiterate a couple of things. One that Director Cummings mentioned about cutting the fee. And while it sounds good that we're reducing the burden on people who get the ticket, he's absolutely right about the behavior. The fees are put in there to change behavior. And I've spoken about this before. I had a tractor trailer in my ward that was parking, took 2 parking spaces, and Ms. Stansfield knows that she gets a lot of phone calls from me about people parking, people complaining, and so on. And this particular vehicle was parked overnight. Tractor trailer took 2 parking spaces. We would issue 3 tickets, then they would come and pay before that 4th ticket got issued. There was nothing we could do. It just continued and continued. And it was cheaper for them to pay the $25 a night than it was to pay for parking of this vehicle somewhere else. That's one of the things I wanted to mention. I also wanted to mention that, you know, I had a constituent who had received multiple tickets and she didn't pay them timely. And I think they actually got into excess of almost $300 and her vehicle had to be towed. Or I shouldn't say had to be towed, it was towed. This was a person who worked late at night. She was a nurse who worked in the hospital. My heart broke for her. And I think Miss Stanfield, they worked and they were able to get the car out and so on. But the bottom line was she lives in a building that has too many apartments, too many cars for that type of building. So they all tried to jam into this one tiny little parking lot. And she either would stick out of the road or whatever the situation was. And that's kind of, to me, the essence of where our problem lies. Our problem lies in that whether it's a zoning board or whoever it is that's approving, they're approving these multi-units that have too many cars that would be allowed to it, and then there's no parking. And this is where it really lies. I got a complaint about another person who said, you know, and I've mentioned this before, I have X number of units, but one of his units has 5 bedrooms. That's 5 cars, and he doesn't have enough space. And he was very angry that his people were getting tickets. And someone had to have approved that, but they don't look at the parking. They look at, you know, for every unit, 1.5 cars. Well, that's not the reality of what we have today. So I really think this parking study needs to be done before we start taking action. And I loved a lot of the ideas that Alderman Lopez brought forward, but I just fear if we start whittling at things that we're going to get into just way too much information. And I was also concerned, this is the first time I'd heard it, that you can get a permit and park anywhere where there's an overnight permit. I completely disagree with that. And the reason for it is much what somebody had brought up. If you get an overnight parking ticket, you can park anywhere, and you may be taking a parking space that someone thinks would be allocated to them because they paid the fee to be able to have overnight parking, hopefully close to their home. That's why they did it. That's why they got that spot to become an overnight. So I really think that's where we need to be looking into. And I think this study would really be able to do that. So before we go too far, I think we need a study. And it's really important. And Ward 3, for instance, my area, anybody could park there, other than it would drive me crazy having cars in front of my house all the time, but they could do it safely. On Maywood Drive, that would not be a problem. On Royal Oak, probably not a problem. But you start going down into Norton Street, or you start going down to Summer Street in the French Hill, or even some of the side streets, even like Granite Street and so on, you're going to have some issues. So I'd really love to have a study done. But my question about this study is, and I'm sorry that I've taken so much time, is would it just be downtown and French Hill, or would it be the entire city? Because I'd really like it to be the entire city, street by street. Director Cummings, I mean, through you,
Well, if
Mr. Chair.
you can hold on, yes, thank you. I just want to announce in the queue, we do have Alderman Schmidt, but Director Cummings did show he wants to answer, I think, in response. So, Director Cummings.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I missed, you broke up a little bit there, Alderman Clee, if you asked me a specific question.
Just one simple question. Would the overnight study be for the entire city, every street, or would it just be downtown French Hill in that area?
No, it would be citywide, because we really need to have an understanding citywide as to what I'm going to use, what the norm of the community is, or what the culture of the community is. And more to the point, we need to have enough consensus or public outreach or community input, whatever term you want to use, so you all around the horseshoe have the confidence to act. And that's really important, because the Ward 1 is very different than Ward 4. And I think we need to spend some time understanding what the needs and wants are in Ward 1, not to pick on Ward 1. But it's a good example as to the differences in the community, and we need to have a solution for each area of the community. Again, a one-size-fits-all approach may not be the best approach anymore, and we're seeing it with this conversation this evening. So it would be citywide. I just wanted to take a moment and say, in somewhat in respect to our land use and development team in the city, they're under a lot of pressure to produce housing units, right? So on one hand, we hear we need more housing, and that's true. And so, and I'm very sympathetic to that. And I have pointed out to them that we have this public policy disconnect where we are approving multifamily residential houses with creating without having the off-site parking requirements, which creates a need for on-street parking or off-premise parking. And then to couple it even further, it's done in neighborhoods where you're not allowed to park overnight, and you're really putting a burden on the tenant, and it's really unfortunate. And to some degree, the landlord or the owner of the real estate's response is, well, we'll figure it out with a quote unquote private sector solution. Our neighbor right beside me is going to rent me their parking space, or I own the building beside it, and so I'm going to allow for overage parking in my parking lot. There's all these things in theory that are supposed to work out, but then when push comes to shove, the cars are out on the street. We then end up ticketing them, and then you guys get phone calls and complaints. And that's and I think what you're seeing here is just more of an exercise of Nashua as a community kind of growing up into its next phase of what it is, and that's a natural evolution for a city. And so developing these public policy strategies and goals is really important. That's why I'm a big advocate of having a study. I think Alderman Lopez has a great idea in terms of putting a steering committee together. I think that makes a lot of sense. It's whatever's going to give a comfort level for this body to want to act is really what it comes down to.
All right, thank you, Director Cummings. The chair has Alderman Schmidt next, with Alderman Dowd in the queue. Alderman Schmidt.
Thank you. I was going to say, don't forget Alderman Dowd. He's been waving at you for half an hour. Yes, I think before the study is done, I think the steering committee or a subcommittee is absolutely essential, because I think that is a stupendous way to find out the feelings of the committee without sitting in the middle of another meeting that's got other business. Just that business would be really good to study. Yes, Ward 1 doesn't really have a problem with parking. We've got wide streets, we've got driveways, we've got garages. We're in good nick over here, but we do go into the city. We do need to park downtown, and that is a real issue for a lot of people. 2 questions. If we know where people are likely to be staying until 3 o'clock to finish their work, can we start later ticketing in that area? Is that a possibility? That would certainly take the pressure off Alderman Laws, and it would make sense to me, because you really don't want to change their behavior. You want to accommodate people who are working down there. Is that a possibility? Yes. Okay. I'll go on with the next question, and the last one. In Ward 1, when somebody needs to park on the street, they simply make a phone call and it's recorded. If somebody has to stay past a reasonable time, and the parking folks may come by and want a ticket, is there an opportunity for them to call and say, I'm working an extra hour, could you please pass by my car? That's all I needed to say.
So if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes, and the chair wants to take a brief liberty before I get into you. Just to remind Alderman Schmidt, there are state laws involved, particularly when it comes down to an establishment where alcohol is being served. By state law, they have to vacate the premises by a certain time. So if they stay over that certain time. So Director Cummings, if you want to reiterate, and we'll go along.
Yeah, so yes, absolutely. Anyone can call in and report their car, and it's and put it on what we refer to as the hut sheet, so people know that that it's being left there and it's on a list, and parking enforcement recognizes that. That is something that is done, and it's done citywide. And then just to answer the question, we already do try to avoid the quote unquote bar areas, knowing that you have employees there, they're not leaving right away. I can say it's not like we go out and target those areas, but some of those employees are parking in neighborhoods, and we don't know who the car is and where they're going, and we're just, if they're parked in a neighborhood and it's not of top of mind that it could be an employee of the downtown, we're not going to know that. But we don't go out and particularly focus on the restaurants or the bar areas for the very reasons that you're talking about.
Thank you, Director Cummings. Alderman Schmidt, you're all set? Okay, I'm going to recognize Alderman Dowd in a second, but in the queue, we have Alderwoman Kelly. Alderman Dowd.
Yeah, I'm gonna a few random thoughts here. One is I pretty much agree with what Alderman Lopez said. I think that a study needs to be done because I think there's still a lot of unanswered questions. Of course, the first question I have is if the result of any of the actions taken on this ordinance result in a decrease in revenue, I think part of the solution needs to be, where's that revenue being made up from? Another thing is as far as the one parking lot for the people that work in the bars to park in, I think our city is spread out a lot more than Portsmouth, and I don't think people want to walk a mile and a half or two to get to a parking lot. So I don't think that would work. One of the things that I thought of is if the establishments have people that are working at those hours, we could simply give them a parking pass that the employees could put in their car so people know not to tag them. They could be controlled by the establishment if they want 1, 2, 3, however many people they have working till that time. I think we need to focus this on exactly find out which areas you want to focus on and solve that problem. I have empathy on the reasons that this came up. I don't think the reduction in fee should be citywide or even the entire downtown. I think it should be where we have problems. And I think there are other solutions that can be worked out. The other thing is that we're coming into the snow season, might even be Friday. And when you have a snow emergency, the fine's $100, and no matter whether you got a permit or not. And that's going to start coming into effect. We're going to have a probably snowy winter. So that just negates many of the solutions. So I think that somebody needs to sit down and figure out the best solution to this problem and then bring it back to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Dowd. Chair recognizes Alderwoman Shoshana Kelly, and also in the queue will be Alderman Laurie Wilshire. Alderman Kelly.
Thank you. I've been taking notes. I have quite a few stickies over here. So I think it's been a thoughtful discussion here. I think the reason why we're here is because there has been a number of issues brought up specifically tied to downtown, whether you work there or you live there, and especially during COVID, as people are feeling more under financial strain, how might we help? I 100% am in support of a parking study. I don't think it should hold us back from making small incremental changes. We put barriers up and down, made Main Street, almost no parking. without the study. So I personally have felt frustrated with the inability to do anything around parking until the study is done. I think the study will give us great information, but we still need to continue to make policy and potential changes, whether they're small, when our constituents need it. So that has been something that I've been struggling with, and that's just a comment. I don't know. I mean, I think there's been a lot of ideas that have come up that are smart here, whether it's a ability to give business owners passes, or even residents passes. Just because we try something doesn't mean it has to be forever. And I think we have the duty to think about it in the lens of what's going on right now and how we're going to continue to go that way. My brother is a chef, was a chef in Chicago, and they just shut down all of the restaurants, and he is unemployed. And so I think we have to consider the fact that we're not saying let's change this forever. We're saying right now people are struggling, and something like a $25 ticket to us, or some people who are listening, maybe they can afford to, like Trisha's constituent, just keep paying that $25. But what happens is it snowballs, and when you're in a socioeconomic difficulty, some people can't even afford that one ticket turns into a second ticket, then suddenly their car gets towed and now they can't get to work. So it becomes a snowball effect. So I don't want to say this is a huge grand gesture or anything for people who are working downtown, but I think we have to think about the impacts right now in our city and what we can do. So with that being said, I think the idea to have some sort of committee talking about these things is a great idea. I want to specifically ask, and I apologize if this has already been answered. I'm a little stuffy trying to pay attention here, but I wanted to know, where we are with the parking study, and when we can. Why is it being held up by COVID? Like, maybe I don't understand all the things that are going to happen, but.
May I, Mr. Chair?
Absolutely. Thank you.
So, great question. We are about to get underway with a full comprehensive parking study right before COVID hit. And that was, we had issued an RFP, we had selected a vendor, we put them under contract, we even issued a purchase order. So we are ready to go. And the decision was made at the recommendation of the consultant as you don't want to move forward with this parking study because, or at least some very specific elements of this parking study, mainly because your data that you're going to be getting will be, biased. It won't be accurate, and you're not going to be able to make good, sound policy decisions based off of that data. You need to let it stabilize. You need time to, to observe how people are behaving, seeing if they're back to normal. Then you can go out and count cars. Then you can go see what occupancies are. Then you can go out and see how long people are staying in parking spaces, seeing what people's driving habits may be, what people's walking habits may be, and you'd get better data. Putting that aside, this summer, I asked, because I foresaw this issue and I want to rectify it. I asked the consultant to just scope out the task of conducting an assessment and make some recommendations on an overnight parking program for the city of Nashua. And I brought that scope to, I believe, infrastructure or PUDC, and we had a conversation on it. And the consensus of the group was, when we really aren't ready to move forward with that, let's just wait until the parking study commences. And when is that going to be? We originally were thinking it was going to be September of this year. And we were ready to go. And then again, in talking with the consultant was like, we don't want to waste your money, so let's wait. And so now we're talking about next spring to start again, maybe next spring. But again, I mean, it's going to be, dependent on how people are behaving and where we are with COVID, whether we're really going to be able to push forward with doing the full-blown study. Could we pull out some areas beyond the overnight parking task and maybe some other tasks and do it a little bit more piecemeal? I do think there's a way to do some of that. That's more of the research. That's more of the, best practices that other communities do. But it would be harder because the story we would be telling is much longer, and getting consensus is that much more difficult. The amount of time you let something linger on out there. And so, there's pros and cons to the different approaches that we have been looking to take. But that hopefully gives you an answer as to where we are.
If I could follow up.
Follow up. Excuse
So you
me,
started-
Alderman Kelly, Alderman Lopez, to save the blood circulation in your hand, I will recognize you shortly. Thank you.
So you started to answer one of my questions, Director Cummings, but my follow-up question was about whether you could break up small pieces of that. I obviously would prefer us to get a whole picture, but now, like, to your point, like, obviously it's not going to happen in September, isn't going to happen in spring. What pieces could we potentially look at to start to make some changes?
Yes, I do think, but just to be 100% clear on this, the stuff that we would be looking at is going to be the non-controversial stuff that, for instance, we could probably pull out the staff assessment and do that, with them, and get a good understanding as to how many employees we need to have, what roles and responsibilities they have compared to comparable communities, provide you with that data so we have that operational plan in place. But that's really not going to solve the public policy related questions, which are, where do we set fees at? Should we start charging for parking? Do we want overnight parking? How long should turnover be on Main Street? Can we go away from pay stations and just use mobile apps? Should we be, looking at buying another parking lot in select neighborhoods for more communal parking? Those more controversial, strategic, public policy type of questions, you're not going to be able to address, or I would recommend that you don't look to address those without having, good data behind you and good community input.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, the chair would like to remind members of the public, we strongly encourage public input, but according to the traditions of the board and the different type of committees, we have two public points in the meeting, and there's in the beginning and the end. So any comment that is written that is on the thing would be considered interjecting, in my opinion. So if you can please refrain, and at the end, the chair would like to recognize you, and to then you can speak publicly at that particular time. So I respect you for doing that. The chair recognizes Alderman Lopez.
Yeah, so I anticipated some of the complexities that were being brought up by Director Cummings. And while what I think most of our constituents are seeing and expressing concern about is literally how it affects them immediately when they're getting tickets, when their street doesn't have access to on-street parking, when their street does have access to on-street parking and somebody's misusing that. There are also going to be other complexities with regards to, do we need to use credit cards or apps or whatever. So that's why I have been concerned about the scope of this study and the likely snowballing of it into other issues. I've said repeatedly that we can blow an issue up so that it's so large that we can't do anything about it, but that's just giving us an excuse not to actually represent our constituents. So to that point, I'd like to point out to the constituents, I did check the meeting that we had, and while the consensus was that we shouldn't move forward with the parking study, I believe a direct quote from what I said at the time was, "I'll take what I can get." So there isn't unanimous belief that we should do nothing on this. I think the scope of it becomes intimidating the more we get into it, which is why I think we should take steps that we can define, we can definitely take. So starting that steering committee in order to take leadership of that, I think is a step that nobody has objected to yet, and could be specifically helpful in what Director Cummings described as the non-controversial, because there is research and data that has been done on this before, in order to justify the Tree Streets pilot, the confirmation and finalization of the pilot program, the expansion into the French Hill area. So there's data there, and there were steps that we had proposed that I think some of them were taken, but we never really capitalized on. I know at one point the city clerk's office was working with DPW and fire to identify all of the possible streets that we could allow on-street parking on, and then all the ones that they would recommend against. And I believe they were keeping track of, at least until last year, all of the requests that people would make for on-street parking. So that's still data that could be useful. It's pre-COVID, so it's not going to be impacted by the lockdown or all that kind of stuff. I would argue that while the commercial parking has definitely been somewhat depressed with regards to how things have functioned because of COVID, we could probably still look at residential, because people didn't exactly like forego going to their homes. They stayed in their homes. So where people were on street and needing more parking, I can name a couple constituent property owners who have clearly indicated that they need more parking available. So there is data and there is steps that may not be formal enough for a comprehensive and full study, but is definitely adequate to make preparations so that when we do the larger study, when COVID is blown over and the world is all perfect again, at least we're ready to go. Like, at least we have made tangible progress. That group could also be very influential in taking steps that are not necessarily controversial in terms of impacting traffic, parking, or that kind of stuff, but maybe make it a little bit easier to use the existing program that we have, such as exploring that whole regional aspect, identifying different street areas, what would the logistics of that be, and that kind of stuff. So I really want to emphasize that we could move forward with that as a step, period, and we could reduce the scope or impact of this particular legislation so that it's achievable with things we already do. We already give away free parking for the holidays, for example. So for the duration of that project, adding, and we're not going to ticket you if you stay too late, might be a feasible idea that doesn't have anywhere near the financial impact of what was initially proposed, because those are streets that are all right downtown in Main Street. We already have a general idea of what that will do to our general revenue. So, I mean, unless I'm mistaken, I don't think there's a huge amount of loss likely to be done there, and not that much behavior that needs to be changed either.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. Alderman Clemmons.
Yes, Mr. Chair, through you to President Wilshire. President Wilshire, do you think that you could set such a committee up? I don't know if that needs to have legislation or if that's something that the president can decide to do.
I think in the past we've done it through legislation, but I'll look into it tomorrow. I was already thinking of doing that.
Yeah, thank you very much, because I do think, I agree that it's a good idea. I think we can get some short-term solutions out of that, and move forward, and I would be happy to serve on the committee as well.
That's all it is, Mike. I will look into it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Alderman Clemmons. Any other questions by any other alderman? Alderman Wilshire.
Alderman O'Brien.
Okay. So, Tim, how wide a problem is this right now? I mean, are we hearing from the folks in the maybe Railroad Square area where it's really tight and small, and we might need to look at what we can do there? Is this a really downtown wide issue? Are you hearing from other, residents downtown or bars that they're having issues? No.
No, I mean, we really aren't hearing a lot of complaints other than, I would say, the usual suspects who constantly complain. I mean, they are right. I mean, but no, there isn't this there's this not that widespread outcry.
Okay, so we could focus on where these concerns are. You know, the few people, I mean, I don't see a huge outrage here. I don't see like 10 different bars and half of, Main Street saying this is a huge problem, but I think we do need to focus on where the problem is. And there's really no reason we can't do that. And concurrently do the study, even if we carve out the overnight piece. I don't know. I would like to set up a steering committee and have them take a look at it. I'm not really in favor of this legislation. I mean, more in favor of trying to work and resolve the issues at hand right now and continue with what Alderman Lopez and Alderman Kelly have suggested, and trying to resolve this now for where we're having these issues. So, thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Wilshire. Alderman Lopez.
I would be incredibly negligent if I didn't point out that last year I had an entire petition dropped on my desk on the back of a parking ticket from 11th Street. And this year we had a petition from another street which had like 17, 18 signatures, and we tabled both of those. So we do hear from constituents when there's a problem. So it would be good if we declare our intent to act to do that.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. Alderwoman Kelly.
Alderman O'Brien.
I believe Alderman
Oh,
Karen
I'm
wanted to
sorry,
go.
I didn't recognize you. Alderman Kelly, could you please hold off? Alderman Karen, please, excuse me for forgetting about you.
No, that's okay. I have a question through you to Director Cummings concerning this, just doing the overnight parking study. How soon could you get that started if the PDC and Infrastructure Committee approve that? And how long do you think that would take?
Jill, do you have the scope by any chance at your fingertips? Because I'm going to be doing this from memory. So, I mean, I'm going to say if they're available for work and they can put this in the queue, when I say they, that's the consultant, we should be able to get them under contract in short order, probably in November. I don't think it's going to require Finance Committee approval even. We should be able to just move forward with that. How long is it going to take? I'd probably say just after the first of the year, probably a January type time frame. It really comes down to how much community input you really want to have. So there's confidence to act. What I had scoped out is one ward meeting, so that would be a 9-week process right there before we would actually, move forward, so we could have very specific conversations about each individual ward. Obviously, we could, refine that scope if that's of interest, but that was sort of what I was thinking we would do to help give some feedback and some direction. I would be remiss not to point out that as equally as we hear from people who say they want on-street overnight parking, we also hear from a strong contingent of folks who say, I don't ever want on-street parking on my street. Please don't do it. In fact, my neighbor's been doing it for X amount of days. Why haven't you been out here to ticket them? And we get those calls too. And so so it's really important that, folks and when I say folks, you all have this information so you can make a decision as to what you'd like to see happen.
A follow-up, please. Thank you.
Follow-up, yes.
Thank you. I agree. I like the idea of a steering committee, and I think it's great that Alderman Wilshire can look into that. I think that would help the group that's looking at this overnight parking. This didn't happen, and I agree with Director Cummings. I have a lot of residents that don't want on-street parking, but we also have the inner city that would like some of that. in Ward 7. But the thing is that, as Alderman Dowd said, winter is coming. And if you lower this parking fee, people don't care. They'll park. If Alderman Cleese got someone parking a tractor trailer and doesn't care about paying $25, some people won't care about paying $10. So we have to be very cautious on this. We have to look at this, and I agree with Director Cummings because I've had to do this. You don't try to set up how much money you're going to collect in order to pay staff. And if you give up having overnight parking tickets throughout the city, we're not just talking about the downtown area, you're talking about them being all over the city. This can impact how people act about leaving their cars on the street because they know there is no one there to hand out tickets. So I have a real concern about this. I think we need to take a deep breath and look at that. But I agree that the committee or whoever's in charge should be looking at doing just the overnight parking study and to have that steering committee work with them to get that done in as quickly as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Karen, and thank you for being patient. Alderwoman
That's
Kelly.
okay. Thank you. I don't want to repeat anything that's been said. So one of the comments I wanted to make that I thought was interesting, Alderman Lopez brought up pilots. And I think if we put this committee together, piloting has been, I mean, he piloted a program for overnight parking in the Tree Street. So it might be an opportunity to try something where we know we're not locked in for a long length of time, but also gives us, it might even give us some data for this parking study. So I think that might be an opportunity to try, even if it's, we're going to try giving, 3 bars, 5 passes. I don't know what it is. I'm not a parking specialist. I don't want to be a parking specialist, but I think that might be an opportunity there. And then the only other thing was I appreciated your response, Director Cummings, about why it hasn't started yet. And I hadn't even thought about, like, we're not leaving our houses as much. But I do think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that overnight parking probably has not changed drastically because as Alderman Lopez pointed out, like people are coming home still.
Yes, I completely agree with that. I'm sorry. Yes, you're absolutely right. That's why it's one of the ones I think you could move forward with if there was a desire.
I would very much be in favor of moving forward with any piece of this parking, especially the overnight, as that's come up quite a bit. And I think it's interesting. I'm sure people don't always know to reach out to your office or, Jill, but I think personally, my number one calls are for parking related things, whether it's business owners or general constituents.
Thank you, Alderwoman Kelly. Alderman Lopez.
For the purposes of moving forward, I kind of want to propose an amendment that, I think Alderman O'Brien's used to my shenanigans here. Rather than proposing specific language, I would like legal to modify it if the committee is interested in pursuing it. But I would like to propose we amend the legislation to be specific to the holiday parking program. So the streets that are identified for the duration of time that we already approve annually for free parking during the Christmas season, we could try the reduction of parking on that. We would have an idea of how much of a detriment it actually has on the parking revenue, at least in a small scale. And then additionally, it would give us a way to address the current situation that we're in with holidays coming, with budgets being stretched, with COVID-19 issues taking place. It's sort of a step forward that I don't think has very many drawbacks in terms of how much it would hurt the city or the parking plan as it is. Director Cummings has
Yes. Thank you, Alderman. Director Cummings, did you want to respond?
I just wanted to caution the idea of using the holiday legislation, and I actually want to defer to Jill Stansfield because I just want to make sure you're getting what you want, and I'm pretty sure that is only what's considered quote unquote zone 3. That legislation is zone 3. Jill, am I correct in that? So zone 3, I just want to make sure folks know what zone 3 is, because if you went in the direction that you're talking about, you may not be capturing the area that you're looking for. For instance, up by Railroad Square, Jill, is that zone 3?
No.
Railroad Square is zone 2. So,
and
portion
that's
of zone 3 on Canal Street, though.
So you might be able to pick up some there, but you wouldn't get Railroad Square. So anyway, so I point that out to you just as a cautionary tale that you may want to think about that.
Well, and just to respond, I appreciate that, but my sense of this committee is if we don't scale this down, then they're not gonna do anything. So I wanted to start with something that was actually actionable. If anybody feels like they want to expand it into zone 3, I feel like Alderman Klee, that's her constituency, she could advocate for them. But I wanted to start it somewhere because my priorities here are, number one, reducing the penalties for people who might be parking in a mixed residential and commercial zone. And those side streets that are in zone 3 there's people that are living there all the time. They are ones who get nailed. It would at least give us a starting point. And additionally, one of the things that Director Cummings and I talked about was there's other ways to modify behavior than just fining people, and doing a marketing strategy and even incentivizing, hey, if you park on this street over here, it's free. Plus, if there's a problem, then it's a smaller ticket. That starts to direct behavior right away. So it reminds people that they're going to have to pay $15 if they're stayed parking too late. Whereas before there was no conversation of that and they just get the 25. And B, but it couches it. It's like decision management where you're offering two choices, either take your car away or get fined, versus the imagined choice, I just put my car there and I can do whatever I want. So in terms of behaviorism, I was looking at it from that perspective. And then the streets, I think we already kind of know and can account for the impact of them. I guess the only concern I would have is that we would want to accompany that with messaging to make sure that like Director Stansfield, or sorry, Assistant Director Stansfield, Jill, doesn't have any confusion among her staff as to what the charge is going to be on what street. And then there's no confusion on that end. So.
Thank you, Alderman. Was that a question, or you're all set, Alderman Lopez?
No, I was just commenting on the logistics of it. That, I mean, like any change, we'd have to implement it with a plan. But I think if we move forward with the holiday parking thing, we could include this reduction in an announcement of that, and it would improve awareness of which streets are holiday parking. It might even get businesses in the habit of directing people towards specific streets, and overall start the process that I think the economic development and parking departments could use, where there's community messaging instead of individual initiatives.
Okay, thank you, Alderman Lopez. Alderman Clemmons, did you want to speak?
Well, I just had a clarifying question. Was that did Alderman Lopez make a motion to amend, or I'm not sure?
I made a motion to amend.
Okay, now let me go over the procedure. I introduce this without any recommendation. So there's no pending motion. So I'll call later. I think people still want to discuss the issue at hand. And then I will call that pending recommendation and to go for the amendment at that point.
I could combine those at a later point too and make a motion
Okay,
to
thank you.
propose it as amended,
That would
if
be
that's
great.
the direction people want to go in.
Okay, thank you, Alderman.
That way we don't have 20 motions.
Kind of makes it all mental. Thank you. Yep, okay. Any other further questions by members? Okay, the chair at this time, who has been sitting there patiently waiting, I don't know if she is or not, Ms. Stansfield, do you have anything that you want to add to the discussion?
Only that I concur with Director Cummings. I just caution against making any, moves without really taking into consideration everything. I guess my biggest concern, and because I deal with this on a daily basis, is we actually receive quite a bit of complaints in permit neighborhoods specifically where, and I'll give you an example, Ash Street is a really good example where we have a lot of permit holders and a lot of them will come home in the evening and there's lots of out-of-state plates, there's vehicles without permits. So taking away from those who are trying to abide by the program. So I just caution, I'm just very cautious of that because I feel for these residents who are taking the appropriate steps, the right steps to have a permit and park on the street. And we do have quite a few areas where we do have these issues, and it is something we have to stay on top of. And there are folks that are okay with paying $25 and continue to pay $25. So that's the only thing I wanted to add, but yeah, I concur with just about everything Director Cummins said. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you. The chairman would now like to basically speak, if I may. Though some of a lot of the members on the board know that I left the city of Boston to move up here to seek employment, and it was one of the best things I ever did. But I kind of noticed that over the years of coming up here, Nashua has kind of lagged behind some of the trends that existed in Boston, perhaps maybe 30 or 40 years. And parking is one of those particular issues. The reason I would like to speak at this time is to say that I think we need a very slow, methodical approach to this. You heard me say this before, but if we go about this piecemeal and then do a parking study, once we give, right now, there is no overnight parking except in designated areas. And I think you can appreciate if we did the parking study, I would imagine we will, if any great changes, we'll hear from those designated areas. And if we increase the size to more of those areas, we'll hear from them as well too, if the recommendations of the parking study comes up. My mother grew up in South Boston and knew no fury of a woman who used to shovel the parking spot out in front of our house and to have somebody come in and take the parking spot away. My mother took lawn furniture, various type of other inanimate objects, even I think Maggie's drawers flying on the pole to designate the parking area. And woe be anybody that come and took that particular parking space. This is what we're basically looking at dealing with. Kids, Nashua has grown up. So we see every single winter, those that watch the news outlets out of the Boston stations, you see the mayor beseeching the public on the snow removal and the parking issues and everything else. So I extremely use caution with this, whatever is the decision of these committees and everything as we go forward, it's going to have long-term ramifications. There's another thing that's occurring, and it hasn't occurred in Nashua yet, but keep in mind, these 2.5-story wood frame buildings that are apartments now, what happens when they become condos? And that's a phenomenon that is happening in the city of Boston. They're going to demand parking spaces. And so therefore, this is what part of the study should need to come to address, and to be one of the questions that I think that I would ask that particular group to address it and everything. So that being said, I would like to thank, let me see, I'd like to thank Ms. Stansfield for coming up with the particular her schedule to let us know what other in the community is doing. Director Cummings for your input and everything. And what we have right now is a particular motion. There is no standing motion on 020-032. So therefore the chair would call, do I have a motion on 020-032, reducing the fine for overnight parking violations? Alderman Lopez.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that the existing legislation be modified to apply to the holiday parking program, and that be voted upon by this body in order to be recommended for final passage. Actually, Alderman O'Brien, I think we probably have to do two motions. There's kind of no way around it.
Right, the pending motion would take first priority. And
Okay.
the pending motion to introduce it before the motion can become amended. Yes, Alderman, excuse me, Director Cummings.
I think it may help matters because actually first I want to check to see if we actually passed legislation for holiday parking for this year. I'm not aware that we have. So that's first item.
Alderman O'Brien did a couple months ago.
So that's first item that I would want to check, but it may be more specific or more accurate for you just to amend it to be zone 3, which is what I think you're trying to do. And that's the same area that's covered in the quote unquote holiday legislation.
That's true, but there's also a scope of time that's already defined.
So I would include that into this amendment. So whatever that may be.
Okay, and now we're getting back into the language of the amendment, but we don't have a pending motion to be amended. So will a member of the committee please give me a motion?
I'd like to make a motion for to recommend final passage of this legislation as initially proposed.
Discussion on the motion. Okay. I will leap forward on this one. I don't think this is ready for prime time. I will not come up with a rash decision. The pending motion as it exists right now for final passage will make it into law that we are going to go with reducing the fines to overnight parking. I think we have heard that this can come to a financial loss for the city of Nashua. The city of Nashua is not in the business to heavily fine the public, but I think as Director Cummings did say, to try to get better type of reconstructive behavior out of some of the things. But however, by the pending recommendation of final passage, we'll push this ordinance through. It could destroy the people that are doing the parking program and practically eliminate it. It could also be a backdoor vehicle, and no pun intended, to allowing overnight parking for an area. It doesn't address the several points that have been brought up this evening. So therefore, the best way to discuss the whole complete discussion of what was brought up at this meeting, which I think several different points, steering committees, the study, and other different things would not be needed if this recommendation of final passage goes through.
Mr. Chair, it's a point of personal privilege, if you don't mind, I'd like to clarify.
Excuse me, the chair is speaking.
Right, the point of personal privilege is when you visit an intention, and I have the right to clarify that immediately.
No, you don't. And
you should know that as chair.
Alderman Lopez.
You're visiting my intentions after we just had a long discussion about what I was doing. So I'd like to clarify that I was not proposing that for final passages for purposes to vote on that, but so that we could introduce discussion and then amend it.
Alderman Lopez, the chair interprets that I asked that you could not amend, that we need a previous motion. And the previous motion that you did make was for final passage.
In order for it to be amended.
Excuse me, Alderman Lopez, as per our tradition, after the pending motion of final passage has been made, then comes discussion on the motion. That is the level that we're at right now. And what I am doing is discussing the motion until I was interrupted.
Well, I would like you to clarify that you are aware that that is not my intent behind the motion.
Well, you made the motion. Would you like to withdraw the motion?
No, I just don't want you to accuse me of things that were not my intent.
I am not. Alderman Lopez? Can we discuss this later after the meeting? I'd be more than happy to discuss this with you after.
I think my position's clear.
I think mine will be to you too as well. Thank you, Alderman. Look, right now we have a pending motion of final passage, and I'm discussing the motion. So to continue on, lost my train of thought for a second. But the thing is, again, I would really like to be, in a nutshell, methodical on this. So I am not going to support the pending motion of final passage. I would like to see it tabled. I would recommend, and I would support tabling, because at that particular time, I think we can introduce the good ideas that were brought up by Alderman Lopez and others to have the steering committee, to have the study done. And I think that will get us into a better direction than we're heading in right now, in my personal opinion. So therefore, the pending motion, I cannot support a final passage. Thank you. Any other further discussion on the motion? Alderman Lopez.
I'd like to amend the proposed legislation to specifically reference Zone 3 as previously suggested by Director Cummings, and refer to the time period of the holiday parking program.
Okay. There's a pending motion to amend. But I'm going to call for the vote. Well, yes, to amend the motion. Any discussion on the amended motion? Alderman Clement.
Thank you. I'm not sure I understand entirely the motion before us. So I just want to ask a clarifying question. So would this, is the intention to amend this so that in Zone 3, so that in everything that's considered Zone 3, if you will, if you were to park there overnight, that the cost would be that the fee would be $10, the fine would be $10 as opposed to 25 if you were in Zone 2?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know where I'm gonna vote on that, but I appreciate at least understanding. Thank you.
Okay. Further discussion on the motion as amended.
Mr. Chairman. So for clarification, could someone identify what Zone 3, I mean, I'm looking at the ordinances and it looks to me like Zone 3 relates to parking lots. I see Zone 3 as Maple Street parking lot, School Street parking lot, Library parking lot, Elm Street parking garage, High Street parking garage. And you know, if that's the extent of Zone 3, the ordinances already say that you know, parking in those parking lots, people can park in those parking lots overnight for free. So I'm questioning what we're accomplishing here. People can already park in those parking lots and in the parking garages for free overnight.
Can I answer that with a question to Director Cummings?
Yes.
Director Cummings, you said Zone 3 was the holiday parking, but the holiday parking also includes East Pearl and the side streets. Is that in addition to Zone 3?
I believe it covers metered spaces like on Elm Street, off the top of my head. Elm Street meters would be quote unquote Zone 3 as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think, you know, Pearl Street might be. and a couple other side streets. I would have to look it up. And that was my point earlier when I said, I just want to make sure the zone is the accurate zone that you really want to get the data for. Jill, do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah, I can list all of the areas right now if you'd like.
Yeah, I think it would help for, I think it would help for clarification's sake. And also, could you just also, and I want to make sure that this is accurate, can you confirm that people are allowed to park in the parking lots overnight?
Yes, that's correct. There's
okay.
For parking overnight and on the weekends as well.
Oh, that's handy. Can you put that back up?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I can share. Let me share the parking map if you don't mind with that.
It was working a second ago. So I'm not sure that zone 3 is fully encompassing the holiday parking. There might be some specific areas that are not identified in it. Mr. Chair, do we have another infrastructure committee meeting before our next Alderman meeting?
The answer would be no.
All right. My concern with just tabling this is by the time we have another committee meeting and then Alderman meeting, we're going to be halfway through the period that I'm proposing for holiday parking. So I guess I just want to amend my amendment back to its original form and say this is relative to the holiday parking ordinance that is generally granted. And
well, if I may, and Director Cummings, please feel free to help me out. The holiday parking, that was already did come up, correct? To the board, or I'm getting confused. Generally what happens is when I'm looking at, it goes before the Board of Aldermen and we do grant that exists as part of our gift to the constituents during the holiday period. Have we done that yet?
I recall us doing it.
Excuse me, Alderman Lopez. Director Cummings, please.
I'm not aware that we've done it yet this year. I'm not saying that you didn't do it. You could have done it and I'm just not aware of it. But I haven't seen that legislation move forward yet.
Ms. Stanfield, do you have any recollection on that?
I do not believe it has come up this year yet.
Because where it hasn't come up, and if that is the case that it hasn't come up, then Director Cummings would be that would be more fertile ground for Alderman Lopez's amendment.
If you wanted to handle it that way, you could handle it that way as well. I guess I'm just kind of looking to find out, I mean, should we ask to get this legislation filed? Because it's hasn't been filed yet, and you typically want to get it approved in an expeditious manner. So
okay,
so we can work to get that for your next meeting, which I think would be November 10th. That's the next Board of Aldermen meeting for first reading. And I guess if you we can look to have it written in whatever way you'd like.
Right. Well, I think when this goes through, I think we could probably put it through and then go through the first reading with the recommendation for a second and third reading to follow, where it's been a perennial type of thing. Alderman Wiltshire, would you, as president of the board, would you like to make a discussion on that?
Yeah, that's typically what we do. I don't believe we send it to committee, do we? I don't think we do. I thought we just.
Right, it's usually a route thing that we do, that it comes, and I don't know what committee it actually comes out, but I think you're right. We just do it every single year as a little bit of a Christmas bonus to the constituency.
I think it gets a first and second reading when it goes to the full board.
Yes.
So we could do that even at our next meeting. I don't know what the time frame is, but.
I mean, I want to just make sure I get the legislation teed up if that's what folks want, so it can get filed for the 10th.
Well, Director Cummings, if you want to do that, then I would be happy to sponsor that.
Okay.
And we'll get it through. Alderman Lopez.
So, given the possibility that I may have hallucinated that entire legislation, I distinctly recall you proposing it and us being in favor of it, but I could have just made that up. In that case, I have a question about procedure. These are two joint committees that are meeting. So if we just table this and then if it turns out we did pass it and I'm not crazy, in the unlikeliest of all occasions, could we bring it up at another committee? Because technically this is a joint convention of two committees. So if there's no infrastructure committee, there may be another meeting. And that would give us time to figure out for sure that it was passed or it wasn't. Because I'd hate to shut this down now and then find out we were wrong and we did pass it like back when there was lockdown and we all just forgot.
Alderman Lopez, I think you're losing the focus on what we're actually trying to do here. Again, 2032 came up through the Personnel and Administrative Affairs Committee. It did go with a positive recommendation and came to the board, but several questions were brought up, and basically the financial loss that was attached to this particular legislation. So therefore, I made the offering that it could come to the joint committee, and was designated by the president of the board to have a joint committee of the Personnel and Administrative Affairs and the Infrastructure Committee to refer it to those committees to come up with a better recommendation. Again, as this bill is written, as what I said in my non-support of 2032, it has negative financial impact on the city, and that's why it was referred back to the committee.
I'm pretty sure that I recommended that it go to infrastructure in the actual meeting and that you accepted that, which I appreciate. My point wasn't to dispute that, though. My point was, if we table it, does it get tabled in one committee or both? Because if we do need a backup plan for at least readdressing this, then we still have another Personnel Administrative Affairs Committee meeting.
Well, I would like to see myself, if this gets tabled, as what happens with all bills that are tabled, they remain on the table until at some point the majority of the committee and will bring it off the table. If this does get tabled, I would like to see that I don't think we need legislation for the steering committee. I think the president of the board is going to perhaps work right on that and to get that committee going. But at the same time, I would like to have a joint recommendation by the two committees, the Personnel Administrative Affairs Committee and Infrastructure Committee, to make a recommendation to Director Cummings to conduct the overnight study and to get that going. And I think that's would be my goal. I think that would be heading in a positive direction to give Director Cummings his marching orders on that particular subject.
I mean, I don't disagree with that specifically if that's your goal, but if the goal is to actually provide relief in that my amendment, I guess what my suggestion would be is see if my amendment passes. If my amendment doesn't pass, then we could table it. But if my amendment does pass, then either A, we shouldn't table it to beyond the point where it's effective, or B, it was a complete exercise in the first place because we already have the ordinance and we have to go amend the holiday ordinance when it gets presented.
Right.
But right now it's on two tables. So we have to have both committees reconvene, which I mean, is that really going to happen before it's like after Thanksgiving?
Well, if you're familiar with the Mason's Rule of Order, you have not withdrawn your motion. So your motion needs either to be withdrawn or voted on, which my intention is I think we're going to vote on it. But we're at the discussion point of the, you're putting the cart before the horse again.
So there's a problem. Like I can withdraw the motion if the holiday parking hasn't moved forward, which, I mean, I guess at this point I should admit that everybody, oh, there's Jan waving her hand. I think she knows something.
Yeah.
It has not come before us yet.
Okay.
All right, then I'm withdrawing my motion because this is just a waste of everybody's time.
So if we decide we can have the ordinance for holiday parking amended to suit this, so that this bill we can just table, yes?
Yeah, I think that makes more sense.
Thank you.
Bingo. Very good. Okay, thank you, Alderman Lopez, for withdrawing your motion. So the pending question is now 020-032, which has the recommendation of final passage. Am I correct? By Alderman Lopez, correct?
Insofar as I just wanted to bring it up for discussion so we could vote on it.
I think he'd like to table it.
I would move to table the legislation.
Okay. Alderman Lopez has reflected he would like to withdraw his motion of final passage and for a subsequent motion of tabling. Any discussion on tabling? You can't really discuss it. Tabling is a non-binding
vote.
No discussion.
Thank you. All right, so I'll call the question. Can the clerk please call the roll?
Oh, I can indeed. Alderman O'Brien.
Yes.
Alderman Lopez.
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt says yes. Alderman Jettie.
Yes.
Alderman Tenza.
Yes.
Alderman Karen.
Yes.
Alderman Clement. Alderman Clemens.
Yes.
Alderwoman Kelly.
Yes.
And Alderman Cleaver.
Yes.
That's 9 yeas.
Okay, motion is tabled. Okay. Seeing we received nothing, I received nothing. Other items, ordinances that we have before us that shall remain on the table. General discussion.
Just a reminder, there is a member of the public who wants to talk. It's in the chat.
That is part of the, yes, we will get to that when it comes down to public comment. Thank you, Alderman Lopez.
Okay.
Yes.
Alderman O'Brien.
Yes. Alderman Karen.
Yes, thank you. So I heard you speak about instructing Director Cummings to pull that section out concerning overnight parking to get started on that. Did you really need a vote? Because I thought Director Cummings said that they could just do it.
That's a very good, and I'll hold off on, your point of order is very well. I think we can have a non-binding without, how should I phrase it, being no objection. If there's no objection from the joint committee, what we can do is get Director Cummings to start looking and to get back to us on getting into the overnight parking. So is there any objection on that? Seeing none, then Director Cummings, you will be charged to start looking into getting into the overnight parking issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Again, back and thank you, Alderman Karen, for reminding me of that. General discussion, I think we have Alderman Wilshire.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone's input. I appreciate Jill being here tonight, kind of telling us, hands-on what's going on. I appreciate everything Alderman Lopez said. I appreciate everything because I think we need time to look at this. I'm willing to work on that steering committee and get some resolution to the, well, I think the steering committee is important first because I think it'll help everyone. Second, I think the study is important. And I also think, like I said earlier, helping the people in this small area that seems to be the one that needs some attention. And I think we'll get to that too. So I'm excited about the steering committee and thanks for that suggestion. It was a really good idea. I think that was Alderman Kelly.
Hey.
Oh, Alderman Lopez. I knew I'd
blind squirrel finds a nut. Come on.
He's not as
I'd say it wrong.
Yeah.
Or have as beautiful hair.
Yes, Alderman Kelly. Okay.
Did you want to hair off?
Yeah,
I did have my hand raised, Alderman O'Brien,
yes,
but
yes.
You have your screen off too, though.
Have already been taken care of.
Alderwoman Kelly, did you want to speak?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was saying that I had my hand up, but both points that I was going to bring up were already addressed. So I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. Your screen is dark. Just your name is showing, so I didn't see it, and I didn't see anything in the question come up. But thank you. Oh, there you are now. Okay, thank you, Alderwoman Kelly. Anybody else? General discussion. Alderman Clemmons.
Yeah, I just want to apologize. I know I got heated a little earlier. I do appreciate everything that Director Cummings does, and as well as Jill. You guys do a great job every day, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else for general discussion?
Chairman O'Brien.
Yes, Alderman Laws.
I just want to echo what Alderman Clemmons said and everyone else. I truly appreciate the fact that this conversation is taking place while there's a lot of disagreement to be had here. Everyone that I'm looking at right now is doing a great job trying to hash this out. And I hope we can find some kind of resolution that we can all agree on sometime in the near future. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Alderman Clay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to echo everything that everybody else has said here about Director Cummings and Ms. Stansfield. They've been great to work with through all of this. But I'd also like to kind of point out, and I think this was also mentioned before, while this got tabled and no decision was made, lots of decisions were made. The talk about a steering committee, the talk about modifying the holiday thing, a lot of really good conversation happened, and heated or not heated, it was really, really good. And I appreciated being able to sit here and listen and participate. So I think everybody did a phenomenal job. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anybody else? Comment? General discussion? The chair would like to say, echo somewhat along the lines from several of the other aldermen. In my time as chairman of infrastructure, this was probably one of the more tougher meetings that I had chaired. There was a lot of great points that were brought up and everything else. And the subject matter at hand, like I say, is very, very important. We're stepping, Nashua grew up, we're stepping into the future. So I thank everybody for participating, and my apologies if I offended some, but I think what we did here was open up the dialogue box to get us going into the right direction. And hopefully with this study, pending study, we'll come to a solution that is worthy of the city. So thank you all for your cooperation tonight. At this time, public comment. I think we have one person in the queue. I'll recognize you're identified as Nate. Could you please, for the record, state your name, and can you spell your last name, and can you give us your address, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Nathan Terriol, Theriau.
Mr. Terriot, if you can hear me, you seem to go on mute.
Can you hear me?
Now we can. Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you get my address? You got my name?
Could you repeat it, please?
28A Lowell Street. Good?
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Terriot, continue.
Okay. So I spoke at one of the last meetings. I think this is kind of taken a little bit too much of a focus on people drinking downtown. And it's not, as a constituent, it's not about the elite that have the money to go out drinking and have too much and leave their car downtown. It's about the people in the neighborhoods that have no parking. Okay. And I mean, it's kind of silly. In these same neighborhoods, we're passing out lunches to children at the schools, but then we're taxing their parents $25. And let's face it, the fine is $25, but it goes up to $35 in 7 days. That is some crazy inflation. Most people don't have that $25 in 7 days, so it becomes $35, and that's why it's such a huge moneymaker. And and Mr. Cummings says that they don't target any one area, but if you're a fisherman, where are you going to go? You're going to go where the fish are. Now, I've lived in Nashua all my life. For 10 years, I lived here at Lowell Street. And before this, I lived in your neighborhood over on Stonehaven for 3 years. Right around the corner, I never had an issue. I could park on the street all night, all week. And matter of fact, there was someone there that had their car on the street the whole time I lived there. Never an issue. But all my life, it's been an issue outside of, let's say, the nicer neighborhoods. So I live in French Hill, and yes, I have a parking pass. There's only 3 houses on my street. The rest are multi-families, like multi-families with no parking. When I walk my dog in the morning, I count $200-$300 every time they're ticketed, and that's just on one street. So I can see why it brings in $200,000 a year. But in a perfect world, if people had parking, we wouldn't be getting that revenue. So the idea that we're ticketing because we need the money doesn't really seem fair to somebody who pays, $1,500 in any apartment downtown with no parking. So, do we want people to not park on the street? No, we want people to park on the street, because if they didn't, we'd lose a lot of money. And the idea that it's a for the bars and restaurants downtown, that's just a small sliver of the problem. The only reason why parking enforcement is moving out into the other neighborhoods downtown is because we've shut down Main Street to parking. It's just a fact. It's a no-brainer. Again, if you're going fishing, you're going to go to the pond where the fish are. So where are those fish? That's every little neighborhood in French Hill, the Tree Streets, and all these inner city places that we have all this special interest, nonprofits, everyone putting all their resources together and giving money and feeling good about it. But then we're ticketing those same people for overnight parking between 12 midnight and 6 a.m. It's illegal to park on the street. Okay, you talk about snow removal. What about the rest of the day? What happens when it starts snowing at 6 a.m. and the plows are going till midnight? Those cars are there the whole time. There's no law against that. It's just the short period between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. where it's not allowed. So is it a safety thing? I don't think it's a safety thing. I think it's a good excuse, and it's a way to brush it off. But the fact is, your constituents, and I'm unfortunately the only one here. This is a big city, and I'm the only constituent speaking to a bunch of people sitting in their house. And I rent an apartment. So it's very frustrating to sit. The last meeting, I stayed on this meeting till midnight. And I'm here again. Most of the people that are affected don't even speak English, so they wouldn't even be at this meeting and have an opportunity to speak. I think it's great that you guys are talking about it, but this parking study's been going on since 2016. Do a Google search. This has been going on. When I first moved here 10 years ago, there was no overnight parking. There was no permit. But it was also policed by the police department. We didn't hire a team of 7 new people to patrol the streets for parking and buy a bunch of new cars and spend all this money to make that money. And maybe I sound a little angry, but it's just, I'm not angry. I'm just frustrated. And I appreciate people like Tom and Brandon and people speaking about it. But the majority of the people aren't the guy with the Mack truck that can afford the $50, $25 tickets every night. The majority are the people, and Mr. Cummings could probably go see that the majority of the tickets are $35. They're not $25. People aren't paying them. People are paying them for the majority when they go to register their car. So you have them by the throat. Once you go to register your car and you're told you have, 20 unpaid overnight parking tickets, that's when those tickets are getting paid the majority of the time, because it's people's livelihood. It's second shift workers filling your Amazon truck so you can get your toilet paper tomorrow, so you don't have to go get COVID at the grocery store. It's those people that are affected. It's not, the people in exit 6. It's not the people in the Heights. It's not the people in the nicer neighborhoods that have parking for 3 cars in a garage. It's just not. The majority is inner city. And no, maybe they're not being targeted, but come on. Let's face it. We're being targeted. It just makes sense. You're going to drive around all night in neighborhoods and not get a ticket, or you're going to go where you can get 10 tickets on one street. And that's what's happening. And unfortunately, most of the people that have the time to be an alderman and that are speaking on this aren't affected. And I'm affected. I see my neighborhood affected, and it's really sad. People have to decide whether, they're going to pay their ticket or pay their light bill. It's 12 midnight to 6 a.m. The rest of the day, every major city, Portsmouth, Boston, like you said, Boston, you put a chair out, that's your spot. You can park on one side of the street one night, one side of the street. Every major city has on-street parking, whether it be permitted, free, whatever the case may be. But this study has been going on since 2016. So there's got to be some information that's been collected and taxpayer money that's been spent that we're not looking at anymore or paying attention to. We're just going to keep on doing overnight parking study. It sounds really nice, but when do we move on? We have Pine Street, we have Lowell Street, we have a couple streets in French Hill. I think it would be easier for the parking study to determine what streets are too small and too unable to have overnight parking, and spend the money on 20 signs. Buy 20 street signs. Have the people on the street pitch in and buy it. I think they'd rather spend $25, $35 on a street sign that says no parking than $35 a night. And I hope I got everything out. I'll probably spend the night, thinking of all the things I didn't say. But I appreciate you guys looking into this, but it's very frustrating to just keep on seeing it drag out and being talked about amongst people that aren't truly affected by it. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Theobald, for
Terriault, French Hill, P-A-T-R-I-A-U-L-T. I know.
Thank you, Mr. Terriault.
It's a problem with being French. No one can say your last name.
Nothing wrong with that, brother. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right. Moving on, there's no, remarks by Alderman? Alderman Lopez.
So I just want to say I appreciate not only the comments that Nate made, but the passion that he brought to it. I agree. It's really unfortunate that there aren't more members of the public. And I think that's what Director Cummings is alluding to when he says we need actually have engagement. I hope people who are excited about being on the steering committee intend to take on that role and assist with connecting and, you know, communicating, because that's something we really need to be doing, especially downtown Alderman. I know I'm not the only one. There's Alderman Klee and Alderman Liu, and there's a lot of people who are struggling and need representation on this particular issue. And it is very frustrating for them not seeing us really move in a way that helps them. We've done a lot for specific areas and specific people, but there's a lot more to do. I will admit that I'm not personally affected by this because I'm never going to get a parking ticket. I don't drive. But I am affected by listening to the residents who are struggling with this or suffering with it. And I can tell you, seriously, I have worked with a lot of people where this has been the straw that broke the camel's back and sent them into a spiral that took months, if not years, to come out of. So not just a small issue. It is a major issue that we should be looking at. And I'm glad that everybody has put the time in tonight to making tangible steps. If it's frustrating that we didn't get our original idea out and approved by the board, yeah, I mean, sometimes politics are a pain and there's a lot of compromise, but I think we took very good steps in terms of agreeing to create a group of people that are motivated and focused on this, and Director Cummings moving forward with the study. So I've been looking for any kind of ray of sunshine for years now, and I feel like I'm finally seeing some. So I appreciate that from everybody.
Any other remarks by Alderman? Okay, there's no need for non-public session. The motion that we all been looking for this evening, Alderman Schmidt.
Oh, thank you. I move to adjourn by roll call.
Thank you. Will the clerk please call the roll?
I will.
And could you call it of the joint committee, please?
I certainly will. Alderman O'Brien,
Yes.
Alderman Lopez,
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt says yes. Alderman Jettie,
Yes.
Alderman Tensa,
Yes.
Alderman Karen,
Yes.
Alderman Clemens,
Yes.
Alderwoman Kelly,
Yes.
and Alderman Cleaver.
Okay.
Alderman Cleaver.
He already.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. That
What
would
do
be
we have?
9.
9. Very good. All right. Motion passes. I'd like to again thank everybody, and we'll declare the joint meeting of the two Personnel Administrative Affairs and the Committee of Infrastructure adjourned at 9:47. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Everyone.
Have a good night.